Chapter 180. There was no need to prove it. Everyone knew how outstanding Sheng Tianzi was. Although Sheng Tianzi kept saying that she was immature, as a 16-year-old girl who managed such a large area, and did her best to protect the people of this area, who could guarantee that they would do a better job than Sheng Tianzi? In terms of identity and status, Sheng Tianzi was the ruler of the entire Tokyo area. This identity and status could not be ignored, and no one could look down on her. In terms of appearance, Sheng Tianzi was extremely beautiful. Not to mention the Tokyo area, even the people in the other 4 areas of the country, and even the people outside of the country, clearly knew about her. Then, when such a young girl who was perfect in terms of appearance, identity, status, and character confessed to him, and begged him to stay by her side, how many people would sincerely refuse? Noah also could not refuse. Of course, this was not because Noah had improper thoughts about Sheng Tianzi. If he had such thoughts, Sheng Tianzi, who was especially sensitive to such things because of her own experience, would have noticed it long ago. Noah couldn't reject the Holy Son of Heaven, because he couldn't bear to reject such a beautiful woman, that's all. If the Holy Son of Heaven made a request that was too willful, and the Holy Son of Heaven was a woman who only had good looks and bad conduct, then Noah would definitely be able to coldly refuse. However, for Sheng Tianzi, in the world of humans, it was believed that not more than 1% of the people would have true malice towards her. Therefore, Noah naturally had no reason to coldly refuse her. However, that being said, Noah also could not accept Sheng Tianzi. At that moment, an indescribable silence pervaded the surroundings. As the indescribable silence filled the air, Sheng Tianzi's originally rosy face gradually turned white, and even transitioned to paleness. Seeing that Noah was silent, one could imagine the nervousness in her heart. Sheng Tianzi could only bite her lips and speak with some apprehension. "I am not able to attract your attention?" If this sentence was said, Noah would probably be spat on by countless people in the Tokyo area. After all, if even a girl like Sheng Tianzi could not attract Noah's attention, then how harsh was Noah's taste? Phew! Noah could only first take a deep breath, and then slowly exhale. After adjusting all the emotions in his heart, he looked at Sheng Tianzi, whose face was full of uneasiness, and secretly made a decision. He did not expect that other than Lisanna, he would use the same method on others. With that thought in mind, Noah stretched out his hand and showed 3 fingers. 3 years. 3 years. Sheng Tianzi was stunned. "I have a reason to leave here, and I cannot agree to your request." Without giving Sheng Tianzi a chance to react, Noah said, "Decision made. So 3 years, 3 years, 3 years, if you still have the same feelings for me, then, at that time, I will definitely come back." Once again, Noah said something without any basis. However, just like the time with Lisanna, even if there was no basis, since he had made a promise, no matter what, when the time came, no matter what, Noah would find a way to come back. With such determination, Noah said the same thing to Lisanna back then, and now, he brought it up again. However, this time, the girl standing in front of Noah was no longer Noah's childhood sweetheart, but Sheng Tianzi. Sheng Tianzi stared blankly at Noah, unable to react for a long time. She lowered her head, and only after a long time did she raise it up, her beautiful face regaining its usual calm and holy expression. "I understand." Sheng Tianzi gave Noah the warmest and most gentle smile in history. "If this is Mr. Noah's decision, then I swear, I will persevere for the next 3 years." It seemed that this kind-hearted girl did not have the slightest idea that Noah was just brushing her off. Instead, she treated it as a test that Noah had left for her. This made Noah begin to realize that he seemed to be slightly moved by this girl, who was perfect in all aspects. He hurriedly shook his head to get rid of those meaningless thoughts. Noah took a deep breath, picked up his shoulder bag, and turned away, no longer looking at Sheng Tianzi. "If you have any difficulties, look for Mu Geng. She can solve any problems that Chrysanthemum of the Celestial Child can solve for you." After saying this, Noah seemed to be afraid that he would be reluctant to part with her. He lifted his feet and walked towards the unexplored territory without looking back. Sheng Tianzi kept looking at Noah's back, as if praying for him. She clasped her hands together in front of her forehead and closed her eyes. I wish you all the best. In the desolate forest, Noah, who was walking aimlessly, turned back and looked at the Tokyo area surrounded by the monolith. I didn't expect that before leaving I would encounter such a thing. Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and let out a long sigh. But there is one more promise that needs to be fulfilled. After saying this, Noah closed his eyes, pressed one hand on his heart, and began to search for that faint throbbing feeling. He stretched out his hand and grasped it tightly. Wang. In the next second, Noah seemed to have turned into a phantom. His figure dissipated with the wind and disappeared in place. Between the worlds. Wang Wang Wang. As Noah opened his eyes, the familiar pure white world in front of him entered his field of vision. The surrounding space immediately emitted waves of joy. He saw that the feathers floating in the crystal ball like crystals danced in joy, and came to Noah's side. It was as if they were welcoming Noah's return, and they circled back and forth like a dance. Looking at the feathers around him that were like children exuding pure joy, and feeling the comfort, as if he had returned to his mother's body, Noah's heart almost melted. Returning to Between the Worlds, Noah felt that the darkness he experienced in the Black Bullet world for a year had all turned into the past, and even his heart had been purified. This feeling was inconceivable, but also very wonderful. At least, with this feeling, Noah felt that everything he experienced in the Black Bullet was worth it. Wang. Then the feathers all began to retreat, and the broken feathers took the place of these feathers to surround Noah's side. Then a broken feather floated from Noah's body and came to the group of broken feathers around him. After circling around for a while, it suddenly touched one of the broken feathers. Ding! After a crisp sound, the two broken feathers perfectly fit together and returned to a complete feather. Its body emitted a soft white light, and it returned to its original state. Noah's heart relaxed, and he looked around at the feathers and broken feathers that were dancing around him. After a while, he came to the front of one of the feathers. This feather, in front of him, was the world of Fairy Tale. With some nervousness, Noah reached out his hand and touched the feather that belonged to the world of Fairy Tale. In the next moment, a feeling of being sucked in appeared in Noah's senses. Noah immediately released his hand from the feather, and his face revealed an expression of ecstasy. This feeling of being sucked in was exactly the feeling of being able to enter the world of the feather. Noah, who had already experienced it once, knew that as long as he followed this feeling, he would be able to enter the world of the feather. Back to Fairy Tale. Suppressing the ecstasy in his heart, Noah followed his senses, came to the front of another feather, and put his hand on it. Ha 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 ha. The strong feeling appeared once again, and Noah clenched his fist. He finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. Chapter 181. Hua. When Noah opened his eyes and took in the scene in front of him, a burst of noise came into Noah's ears. Noah was slightly startled and quickly opened his eyes. What entered Noah's eyes was just a very ordinary street. At this time, Noah was in the middle of a crowded street. Around him, people who were talking or shouting into their phones constantly passed by Noah. On the side of the road, there were also cars moving or stopping. The traffic lights flashed very regularly. Even the sound of the trolley, before it was built, echoed clearly in the distance. Looking at such a scene, Noah's heart could not help but relax. He still remembered that when he first left the world of Fairy Tale and entered the Black Bullet, the place where Noah cut into was an unexplored area where the protozoa raged. At that time, the world of the Black Bullet gave Noah the feeling that it was full of despair and darkness. Now the lively and ordinary scene in front of him, and the scene when he first entered the world of the Black Bullet, formed a sharp contrast in Noah's mind. Naturally, Noah could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed that the world he entered this time was not like the world of the Black Bullet, which was biased towards the negative. Of course, it was also possible that the scene in front of him was just a superficial phenomenon. In the dark of this world, there might be a dark side that ordinary people did not know. In any case, for Noah, this world was just a new and unfamiliar world. After confirming that he could return to the worlds of Fairy Tale and the Black Bullet at any time in between worlds, Noah no longer had any worries. He could enter other worlds with peace of mind and carry out the world fragment recovery. With a relieved mentality, Noah chose to enter this world. On the surface, this seemed to be a world that was close to the culture of the world of the Black Bullet. The evidence was that the language spoken by the people who constantly passed by Noah was Japanese, which Noah was familiar with. This was another piece of good news. After all, a language barrier would cause quite a lot of trouble. Noah had already experienced this when he entered the world of the Black Bullet. Therefore, the first knowledge that Noah crazily absorbed in the world of the Black Bullet was language. He also relied on his extraordinary memory and understanding to master all the languages in the world of the Black Bullet. Now, this approach could be regarded as a preliminary benefit. It allowed Noah to not be like the first time he entered another world, where he did not know anything and broke into the police station to find someone to practice his way of speaking. Since the culture of this world is more or less the same as that of the previous world, that means if I want to move around in this world, I must first prepare an identity. Noah touched his chin. Yes, I must first prepare an identity and a household register. If necessary, I must also prepare an identity card, otherwise it will be difficult to move around. With this thought in mind, Noah left the scene under the gazes of many people, under the slightly eye-catching situation. By the way, the reason why he attracted so much attention was very simple. It was only because Noah had been carrying the side cloth bag with the knight's sword on one shoulder. Da-da-da-da. Under the extremely rhythmic tapping of the keyboard, Noah sat in a private room in an internet cafe. He quickly operated the computer in front of him, causing the computer screen to flash one after another. The scene of a 17 or 18-year-old youth in a private room, in an internet cafe, quickly tapping the keyboard, gave people the feeling that he was a game expert, performing operations that others could not compare to. Therefore, no one would have thought that this 17 or 18-year-old youth in front of them was using the internet cafe's computer to hack into the country's personal data storage database. When he was still in the world of the Black Bullet, Noah had already learned this skill. The situation of the cursed child, in the world of the Black Bullet, was not very good. This was something that everyone knew. In some areas, the cursed child was not even allowed to have a household register. In other areas, there were some extreme people among the high-ranking officials who advocated stripping the cursed child of their household register. Just in case he needed it one day, Noah had learned some decent hacking skills under the guidance of an expert hacker in the Black Bullet. Using this skill, he helped many of the cursed child, who had encountered difficulties in obtaining a household register. Noah didn't expect that there would be a time when this technology would be used on him. After spending a considerable amount of time, Noah finally succeeded in hacking into the country's database. In the personal data storage database, he left his own information without leaving a trace. Now there's no problem. As long as he left his own information in the country's household register, then using the excuse of lost or reported loss, it would be relatively easy to obtain the household register and ID card. After solving this problem, Noah began to browse the country's secret information. Of course, Noah wasn't interested in national secrets at all. He browsed through the information just to see if there were any secrets about this world that were unknown to the public, so that he could carry out his plan. If this was a normal world where there were only ordinary people in all aspects, then Noah could act with less scruples. On the other hand, there were more things to consider. Using the internet cafe's computer to hack was not a safe thing to do, nor was it a rational thing to do. Therefore, Noah also took the time to browse some information. Suddenly, Noah noticed a line of small words marked in red and looked over. He saw that there were only 4 words on the red lettering. Dawn Organization. What kind of organization is this? Noah curiously clicked on it. Unfortunately, after clicking on it, the computer screen immediately showed an error warning box. Suddenly, Noah narrowed his eyes. What did this mean? It meant that this so-called Dawn Organization, even in this country, was classified as a secret among secrets. Even the relevant government officials might not know the contents. For a moment, Noah had the urge to use his hacking skills again and directly hack into this secret, But after a while, he had no choice but to give up. With Noah's hacking skills, it might not be a problem to get personal information, but if he wanted to hack into a country's real secrets, it would be extremely insufficient. Without any other choice, Noah could only search for Dawn Organization on the internet. Of course, this was just to give it a try. Noah did not really think that a country's secret among secrets would be so easily found on the internet. However, although there wasn't any information about the Daybreak Organization, another term appeared in the search results. Haolang Academy? Noah slightly frowned, clicked in, and read the search results. This was a very special academy, a combat technique training school. Needless to say, combat training was definitely a heresy in this peaceful world, and it attracted Noah's attention. What puzzled Noah even more was that there wasn't any detailed information about this school that cultivated combat skills on the internet. There were only a few pieces of information that would be strange to anyone with a discerning eye. First of all, students were exempted from tuition, accommodation, and food expenses. In addition, students' living expenses were provided. In addition, the founder of this academy was a research institution that he had never heard of. There was even less information about it than Haolang Academy. That's right, it was the Dawn Organization. In addition to these, there was no information about the specific curriculum, background, and training purpose of Haolang Academy. The information about the Dawn Organization only indicated that it was a research institution, but there was no record of what it was researching. This was a bit strange, no matter how he looked at it. Noah suddenly thought for a while, then stood up, turned off the computer in front of him, picked up the shoulder bag, and walked out of the room. Chapter 182. Walala. The calming sound of running water rose and fell slightly on the lukewarm surface of the water. Woo! The sound of the tram mixed with the sound of running water, but it did not disturb the tranquility at all. Instead, it seemed to exist naturally, making people feel that it was indispensable. This was the northern part of Tokyo Bay, where an artificial island that could only be accessed by a drooping monorail was located. The artificial island was surrounded by huge rock walls, and a door commensurate with its height was the only entrance to this artificial island. In the center stood a huge clock tower that could be clearly seen from the outside. From the outside, people who did not know would think that this was a military fortress. Of course, the so-called military fortress would not be built in such a conspicuous place. Naturally, the inside of the rock walls could not be a military structure filled with the smell of gunpowder, but some buildings. Although these buildings were extremely out of place with the buildings outside the island, they still didn't fit in. At this time, Noah was walking on a path that was specially beautified with beautiful cherry trees. Not far away, several buildings that were not small, in terms of height and scale, entered Noah's eyes. The style of the buildings was probably closer to the Western style, but also had the flavor of the church. From the appearance, it was not an ordinary high-end building. Therefore, who would have thought that this was a school in the first place? Even Noah felt a little out of place. He tightened the strap of the side bag he was carrying on one side of his shoulder, and could not help but sigh. This was the location of Haolang School. Originally, Noah thought that the location of this mysterious school would be gloomy and shameful. Who would have thought that it was actually such a high-end and beautiful place? Fortunately, Noah was not the kind of person who would judge the nature of a thing based on its appearance. Otherwise, he would really think that this was just the location of an ordinary aristocratic school. In fact, such a high-end place had many mysterious places. Although it was very unbelievable, everything on this artificial island operated with Haolang School as the center. That was to say, the location of the huge clock tower, that could be seen even from the outside, was the specific location of Haolang School. Noah was not the only one. Many students around were amazed by this high-end place. That's right. There were many students around Noah. These students were all here to participate in the entrance examination. Noah had only recently found out that Haolang Academy would be accepting applications from junior high school students from various schools today, allowing these students who were about to enter senior high school to enroll. As long as they could pass the school's admission examination today, Then these students from various schools would be able to enter this school and enjoy the super high treatment of free tuition, accommodation, food, and monthly living expenses. It could be said that about 10 to 20% of the students who came here to register today were here for this reason. As for the remaining 80 to 90%, they seem to have been brought here by the staff of Haolang Academy, who came to the school for an inspection. In other words, Haolang Academy had specially sent people to various schools to poach people. However, that was not strange. After all, Haolang Academy was really too mysterious. Even most people outside did not know of its existence. How could anyone take the initiative to apply for admission? This made the school seem even stranger. Undoubtedly, it looked so high-end, but why could it remain so mysterious outside? Even the students were specially sent to bring them here. Why did they do something superfluous? As long as this place was leaked as a publicity stunt, then the environment alone would make this place famous and attract many students, right? Unless this school wasn't really just for people to study at all. Noah, who felt that this place was becoming more and more mysterious, deliberately found a school that the staff of Haolang Academy was inspecting and applied for admission. Then he accepted a physical examination from the staff of Haolang Academy with the other students. As a result, this morning, Noah received a notice from the staff that he was qualified to participate in the entrance examination and was brought to this artificial island. After that, Noah found out that he was the only one who was qualified to participate in the entrance examination in the school he specially found. What criteria did they use to determine whether a person was qualified to participate in the entrance examination? Noah had no idea about this at all. Therefore, Noah came here. But this was also necessary, because, after learning about the existence of this school and the Dawn organization yesterday, Noah had been inexplicably concerned about this place. It was very likely that this world was giving Noah a hint for the world fragment. With this thought in mind, Noah and the surrounding students from various schools toured the surroundings while being led by the staff to the front of a building. At this time, the staff shouted to the students here, "Please line up here and go in to take the entrance examination in order." After leaving this sentence, the staff left directly, leaving the group of students in the same place after chattering for a while and lining up. Noah was in a position that was neither high nor low. There were not many students who came here to take the examination, so, if Noah was in the position, he could still clearly see the situation in front of him. Looking at the first student in line being led into the building by a person who looked like a doctor in a white coat, Noah scratched his cheek and unconsciously turned his body. Ouch! As a result, in the next second, Noah felt that the end of the side cloth bag on his right shoulder seemed to have touched the person behind him as he turned his body sideways. The other person also let out a slight cry of pain. Noah hurriedly turned his head and looked behind him. Then he was stunned. He saw a young girl with bright brown waist-length hair tied into a ponytail that hung behind her waist. She had a pretty face that was both cute and beautiful, and she was gradually transforming from a young girl into an adult. She was standing behind Noah and holding her head. She seemed to be in pain with one eye open and the other closed. Noah, who did not expect to have such a cute and beautiful girl standing behind him, was subconsciously stunned. When he saw the other person holding her head, he realized that the person his side cloth bag touched was this girl. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Noah touched his head slightly bent down and apologized. "Are you okay?" I'm fine. The girl held her head with one hand, while the other hand hurriedly waved, revealing a cheerful smile to Noah. "It's just a touch, it's not that painful. It's my fault for moving my head closer, otherwise I wouldn't have touched it." Moving closer? Noah tilted his head in confusion, and with some suspicion, took off the side cloth bag on his right shoulder, holding it in his hand, and raised it in front of the girl. Moving closer to this, the girl's pretty face stiffened, and soon after, as if her prank was discovered, she became embarrassed. "Sorry, because I was very concerned about the things inside. I unknowingly moved closer." Speaking until here, the girl simply put her hands behind her back, leaned forward, and put her pretty face in front of Noah, meeting Noah's eyes. There should be something like a bamboo sword inside, right? Hearing this, Noah was a bit surprised. Although it was not a bamboo sword, a knight's sword was still a sword, so the answer was quite close. Hee hee. The girl seemed to think that she had guessed correctly, so she closed her eyes and laughed lightly. Because I have also learned a bit of the way of the sword, and like you, I always carried a cloth bag with a bamboo sword, so I followed behind you out of curiosity. You don't mind, right? Hearing this, Noah did not know whether to laugh or cry. So it was because of this that she was behind him? Noah thought that it was purely a coincidence. Right, introduce yourself. The girl seemed to have just thought of something, and smiled, as if she was very familiar with him, and said this sentence. My name is Yongsang Ivanley. Please enlighten me. Miss Yongsang? Noah also smiled. I am Noah. Noah Dole. Please enlighten me. Chapter 183. Hey Noah. The girl named Yongsang Ivanley put her hands behind her back, turned around, and looked at the shoulder bag in Noah's hand, and asked curiously, Have you also learned kendo? Yes. Noah pondered for a moment, and after finding that there was nothing to hide he nodded. Not just kendo, I have learned fighting, boxing, aikido, judo, martial arts, and spear techniques. Wow. Ivanley suddenly exclaimed in admiration. I didn't expect you to have learned so many martial arts. Then wouldn't it be advantageous for you to enter this school? Advantageous? Noah was startled for a moment before reacting. Oh right, I almost forgot that this is a school to cultivate combat skills. Since it was to cultivate combat skills, then for some students who already had some foundation, it was indeed advantageous. However, Ivanley looked at Noah with some surprise. It's not just this, right? Not just this. This time, Noah was slightly surprised. Then what is the advantage? Ivanley asked with some confusion. Don't tell me. The people who brought you here didn't tell you anything? No. Noah admitted without hesitation. After I participated in the physical examination at school yesterday, I received a notice to come here this morning. Other than knowing that if I pass the entrance examination, I can enter this school, I basically don't know anything else. Isn't that very irresponsible? Ivanley shook his head helplessly. If that's the case, then you don't know what the entrance examination is about, right? Noah nodded without hesitation, making Ivanley smile in confusion. Then his expression became cheerful. Then let me tell you about this school. You're here to tell me about this school. Noah was surprised. In other words, you know about this school? Although I don't know what happened to the people who received the notice of passing the physical examination in the original school like you, but I was directly contacted by the people from the Dawn organization and brought here. Ivan straightened his back and smiled. So before I came here, I was already told a lot about this school. Noah's heart suddenly became lively. Originally, he thought that he would have to go through a lot of trouble before he could find out the true face of this school. He didn't expect that the truth would come so suddenly. But soon Noah frowned again. But, are you sure you'll be fine telling me these things? Ivan didn't expect Noah to say that. He was stunned for a moment, then smiled gently. Noah's really gentle. Noah put on a slightly speechless expression. Why did you suddenly say that? That's because we've only just met. You're already thinking about me, aren't you? Ivan teased. Isn't this gentle? What kind of gentle is this? Noah was a little embarrassed and avoided Ivan's teasing gaze. I'm just curious. This school is so well kept. Isn't it bad for you to just reveal it like that? It's okay. Ivan waved his hand. Since you're already here, Noah, you're someone who has adaptability. So it's okay. Adaptability? The new word caught Noah's attention again. In that case, can you tell me more about it? Ivan smiled without saying anything. He tilted his head, as if he was thinking about how to start. After a while, he clapped his hands. You know about the Dawn organization, right? As soon as he said that, Ivan saw Noah's bitter smile. He immediately smiled bitterly and explained. The Dawn organization is a research institute that studies genetic engineering, and Haolang School was established in the name of this research institute. Genetic engineering. Noah muttered. Ivanley nodded and said, A few years ago, the Dawn organization developed a biological super-enhanced nanomachine called the Dawn Star pattern. It's a special invention that can make the implanted person become an existence far beyond ordinary human beings. After saying that, Ivan raised a finger, and his expression began to become serious. This nanomachine called the Dawn Star pattern is said that only 1 in 1,000 people meets the conditions for implantation, which is the adaptability I just mentioned. And the person who is implanted with the Dawn Star pattern will have physical abilities far beyond the limits of human beings. Even their mental strength will be super enhanced, and they will obtain the ability to materialize their soul. Soul? Noah looked at Ivan in surprise. Of course, Noah knew what a soul was. Materialization of the soul? There was actually such a miracle in this world. Its official name is Blaze. It's a simple weapon that materializes from the soul of the person who is implanted with the Dawn Star pattern. Ivan touched his full chest with one hand and said with some emotion, and the person who is implanted with the Dawn Star pattern and has the blaze and can exert power far beyond human beings will be called surpassers, which is also our next identity. Hearing this, Noah understood the true face of this school. Simply put, Haolang School was specially established by the Dawn organization to select people who had the adaptability of the Dawn Star pattern and bring them to this school for training. The reason why Noah was here should be because he was found to have the adaptability of the Dawn Star pattern in yesterday's physical examination and could become a surpasser. Therefore, he was notified that he had the qualifications to participate in the entrance examination. So, Noah turned his head and looked at the building in front of him. The so-called entrance examination, in fact, is the Dawn organization's people planning to implant the Dawn Star pattern in our bodies? I used to think so, but now it doesn't seem to be the case. Ivan poked his head out from Noah's side and looked over. Since there are people like you, Noah, who didn't know anything before coming here, then the entrance examination should also give you a simple explanation and let you make a choice whether to accept the Dawn Star pattern or not, right? Noah nodded casually, and a thoughtful light flashed in his eyes. Physical enhancement, spiritual transcendence, materialization of the soul, and blaze. Slowly, the corner of Noah's mouth slowly raised. Isn't it interesting? Do you know why I said that you are very advantageous here? Ivan elbowed Noah's ribs and said reproachfully, since you know so many martial arts, no matter what kind of weapon your blaze is, you can use it freely. Isn't that advantageous? Noah shrugged and didn't say anything. Next, Noah and Ivan talked about swordsmanship. However, after chatting for a while, Noah realized that Ivan's swordsmanship was nothing more than the swordsmanship that could be learned in an ordinary school. Compared to the swordsmanship that Noah learned for the sake of battle, it was more inclined towards strengthening one's body. It was completely different from the lethal swordsmanship that Noah learned for the sake of battle. Therefore, Noah only gave a few pointers, and Ivan's eyes began to shine. He was a little excited and kept chatting with Noah. Undoubtedly, they have only known each other for less than half an hour. After who knows how long, the people in front of him finally finished lining up. Noah Doria, right? The doctor in the white coat flipped through the name list in his hand and nodded at Noah. You can go in. It's your turn. Ivan patted Noah's shoulder with a bright smile on his face. Remember to tell me how you feel when you come back. Noah made an okay gesture and walked into the building under the doctor's lead. After passing through a corridor that wasn't too long, Noah came to a room that looked like a health room. There, another doctor in a white coat was sitting in a position. He was holding a gun-style needleless syringe that was filled with liquid, which immediately took away Noah's attention. Could that be the Daybreak Star pattern? Chapter 184. Please take a seat here. The doctor with the syringe patted the seat in front of him. Noah took off the cloth bag on his shoulder and placed it on the wall. He walked over and sat down. After Noah sat down, the doctor said to Noah, "What I'm going to say next may sound unbelievable to you, but it's the truth. Please be mentally prepared. After you explain everything to me, you'll have to make a choice whether you want to stay here or not." After he finished speaking, the doctor did not give Noah a chance to reply and continued to explain. Moreover, The explanation was much more concise than Ivan's. There were only the simple explanations of daybreak star pattern, surpasser, and blaze. Although it was enough to let people understand what was going on, it was lacking compared to Ivan's explanation. Obviously, this doctor had repeated the explanation many times, and was getting impatient. That was why he had such a reaction. However, if he had to repeat the same explanation every time he met another person, he believed that anyone would get tired of it. Noah quietly waited for the doctor to finish what he had to say. He then compared it with what Ivan had said. When he was sure that even though the degree of explanation was different, the content was similar, he nodded. I understand. I'm willing to accept the daybreak star pattern and become a surpasser. Very good. Only then did the doctor reveal a satisfied expression. He picked up the syringe in his hand and said, "The process will be a bit difficult. You have to bear with it. Otherwise, even if you have the ability to adapt, you may not be able to obtain blaze and become a surpasser." After he finished speaking, the doctor rolled up Noah's left sleeve and pressed the syringe against Noah's arm. He pulled the trigger. Poochie! With a soft sound, the liquid in the syringe was reduced at a speed visible to the naked eye and was injected into Noah's body. Noah felt as if a large lump of something was stuffed into his body. It instantly spread throughout his body. Immediately, the thing that spread out suddenly swelled and supported Noah's body. Wong! Noah felt a pain in his chest, and a geometric pattern called star tattoo that was as exquisite as a star suddenly spread out from Noah's chest and exuded intense heat. Goo! The heat spread throughout Noah's body in a short period of time, causing Noah's breathing to become sluggish. He subconsciously let out a muffled groan. Bang! Almost at the same time, with the star mark as the center, a scorching flame fiercely ignited, enveloping Noah's entire body. Chi-chi! Amidst the burning sound, a searing pain spread throughout Noah's body, causing Noah to involuntarily clench his fists. If it wasn't for the fact that he had been strengthened by the protozoa virus in the world of the Black Bullet, at this moment, even if the intense pain didn't make Noah cry out, it would make Noah's tightly clenched fists burst out with veins that represented his great forbearance. Unbeknownst to him, the doctor who was watching this scene was even more shocked. Those who had previously experienced the baptism of the Dawn Star Tattoo either directly screamed out or simply fainted. A situation like Noah's, where even his expression did not change, was something that the doctors had never seen before. Not to mention this time, even in the previous implantation of the Daybreak Star Tattoo, the doctors had never seen such a case. On the other side, Noah, who was under the baptism of the Dawn Star Tattoo, clearly felt the changes in his body. First of all, the changes in his physical strength were minimal. Obviously, even the Dawn Star Tattoo, which claimed to be able to make a person become a surpasser and possess a physical strength that far exceeded the limits of a human, had no way to make Noah's body, which had been tempered thousands of times and strengthened to an inhuman level by the protozoa virus, have any obvious strengthening. However, the Dawn Star Tattoo could not only strengthen a person's body, it could also strengthen a person's spirit. This was something that even the protozoa virus couldn't do. Therefore, Noah clearly felt it. The vast magic power that was sleeping in his body seemed to have been awakened, boiling all of a sudden. Under Noah's perception, it rapidly rose by a large margin. This made Noah's heart startled at first, but then it was followed by joy. He didn't expect that the strengthening of his mental strength would also affect his magic power, causing his magic power to increase. That wasn't strange. Magic was also the power of the heart. If one's mental strength was sufficiently strengthened, one's willpower and thoughts would also become more tenacious. Therefore, once the mental strength was strengthened, the magic power that was directly linked to the heart would also naturally grow, and the magic power would also become stronger. This meant that even though Noah's physical strength didn't increase by much, the Dawn Star Tattoo allowed Noah's magic to increase. This was an unexpected gain. However, Noah's gain wasn't over yet. This was because through the strengthening of his mental strength, his soul could also obtain the ability to materialize, becoming a surpasser's weapon. Unfortunately, Noah was destined to not be able to enjoy the treatment of obtaining a new weapon. Bang! Just like that, the flames burning on Noah's body suddenly rose sharply, expanding more than 10 times in an instant, enveloping half of the entire infirmary. Wah! The doctor, who was watching the show from the side, was almost pounced on by the sudden expansion of the scorching flames. His face heated up, he cried out in alarm and hurriedly jumped away. In the center of the flames, Noah clutched the Dawn Star tattoo on his chest, somewhat dejectedly bending his body, his eyes suddenly widening. Only Noah knew what had happened to his body. Originally, the Surpassor's mental strength seemed to have awakened Noah's soul, attempting to materialize Noah's soul. However, in that instant, the Dawn Star tattoo, that should have awakened his soul, seemed to have encountered an iron wall, completely unable to affect Noah's soul. In other words, with the power of the Dawn Star tattoo, it was simply not enough to allow Noah's soul to materialize. Noah's soul was unexpectedly strong. Moreover, it was strong to an inconceivable extent. At that moment, in order to awaken Noah's soul, the Dawn Star tattoo seemed to want to break through the iron wall that was obstructing it, causing a strong impact on Noah's body. As a result, the flames burning around Noah's body also skyrocketed. Chi. The hot flames were still constantly rolling, telling others how much effort the Dawn Star tattoo had put into Noah's body. Unfortunately, it still had no way to awaken Noah's soul. Over time, the physical strengthening and mental strengthening effects released from the Dawn Star tattoo were instead absorbed by Noah's special constitution. All the power that entered Noah's body would be absorbed by Noah himself. Now the Dawn Star tattoo had encountered the same situation. In the end, a portion of the power that emerged from the nanomachines and was absorbed by Noah's body actually turned into a ball of flame, wrapping around a certain part of Noah's body. Noah's expression suddenly became stunned. This was because the thing that the ball of flame wrapped around was the large caliber modified revolver that was pinned to Noah's back. In the next moment, the large caliber modified revolver that was pinned to Noah's back turned into a ball of flame and drilled into Noah's body. At the same time, Noah also saw that the cloth bag on his shoulder that was leaning against the wall was also covered by the flames that rose sharply from his body. The cloth bag and the scabbard were directly burned to nothing, leaving only the bright and dazzling knight's sword. It suddenly turned into a ball of flame, flew, and drilled into Noah's body. The white knight's sword, the black revolver, the two weapons, under the inexplicable chemical reaction of the Dawn Star tattoo and Noah's constitution, turned into flames and drilled into Noah's body, becoming a part of Noah's soul. In other words, the knight's sword and the revolver replaced Noah's powerful soul that could not be awakened and became Noah's blaze. The flames gradually subsided, and in the end, all of them drilled into the star tattoo and disappeared together with the star tattoo from Noah's body. Noah touched his chest and was speechless for a long time. Chapter 185. At this time, Ivanli was bored out of his mind. His hands were clasped behind his back as he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. His eyes kept glancing at the door in front of him. A faint doubt appeared in his beautiful cat-like eyes. It had been almost half an hour since Noah entered the building to receive the implantation of the Daybreak Star tattoo. Ivanli was puzzled about this. According to the students who had just entered to receive the implantation of the Daybreak Star tattoo, Noah obviously spent more time than the others. Could it be that some unforeseen event had occurred? Thinking of this, Ivanli couldn't help but feel a little worried. Unlike Noah, Ivanli was directly approached by the people of the Daybreak organization and was fully explained. However, like Noah, she was the only one in her original school who had the adaptability of the Daybreak Star tattoo and was qualified to enter here. Ivanli looked friendly and cheerful from beginning to end, but in fact, it was just a sign of uneasiness. Therefore, Ivanli was still a little concerned about the first person he met here. Not to mention that she seemed to get along well with him. If they could enter Haolang Academy together, Ivanli would feel a lot less uneasy. However, now it seemed that something had happened to Noah. Ivanley also heard that not everyone who had the adaptability of the Daybreak Star Tattoo could be successfully implanted with the Daybreak Star Tattoo. There were also some people who could not withstand the implantation of the Daybreak Star Tattoo and were declared to have failed the implantation and could only leave quietly. Noah, could it be the same? Ivanley murmured worriedly. However, in the next moment, as if to dispel Ivanley's worries, the door of the building in front of him opened, and a person walked out from inside. Ivanley's eyes suddenly lit up. Just as he was about to go forward, he noticed something else. That was Noah's clothes were changed. He was wearing a white student shirt and a blue tie. He was wearing a pair of blue trousers and a black uniform jacket. It was the uniform of the boys of Howling Academy. Wow! Ivanley immediately moved closer and started to twirl around Noah with sparkling eyes. It's so different when you put on the uniform. I'm so envious. What's there to be envious about? Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he pointed in the direction of the building. It's your turn now. You'll be able to put on your uniform soon. As if confirming the authenticity of Noah's words, the doctor in the white coat walked out from inside. Next, Yongsong Ivanley. Yes. Ivan quickly responded. He patted Noah's shoulder and ran over while shouting at Noah. Wait for me here. You can't run away by yourself. After that, Ivan ran into the building as if he couldn't wait any longer. Noah was stunned, his mouth wide open. After a while, he let out a bitter laugh. I haven't agreed yet. With that said, Noah was not in a hurry to leave. While the students who were still in line were whispering and pointing at him, he walked to the side and leaned against the trunk of a tree. He closed his eyes, and his consciousness sank into his body. Under the cover of Noah's excellent sensing ability, Noah could feel that there were many extremely small floating objects swimming back and forth inside his body. These extremely small floating objects that human eyes could not capture were the biological super-enhanced nanomachines that Ivanley mentioned, the Dawn Star pattern. This time, the implantation of the Dawn Star pattern brought Noah a lot of benefits. In addition to the minimal physical enhancement, Noah also gained 3 other benefits. 1. Super-enhanced mental power. 2. Due to the influence of the super-enhanced mental power, it indirectly led to the appearance of enhanced magic power. 3. Although the soul was not awakened, the knight's sword and revolver also became his blaze, under the effect of the Dawn Star pattern, and Noah's own physical constitution. Noah also did not expect that his physical constitution, that could absorb all the power that entered his body, would actually produce a chemical reaction with the Dawn Star pattern, resulting in the result of his 2 personal weapons becoming part of his soul. However, Noah could roughly guess the reason for such a change. The so-called surpasser referred to an individual who had been implanted with the Dawn Star pattern and had a physical ability and mental power that far exceeded that of a human. They also obtained the ability to materialize their soul into a weapon, thus obtaining the ability Blaze. The Dawn Star pattern that was implanted into people's bodies was a biological super-enhanced nanomachines that were so small that they could not be seen. Noah's physical constitution that could absorb all the power that entered his body was correct. However, this constitution could not absorb solid power. Could it be that if a sword pierced Noah's body could also absorb the sword that entered his body? That was naturally impossible, and the nanomachines were clearly within the range of solid power, so Noah's constitution naturally could not be effective against them. However, just because it could not be effective against the nanomachines themselves, it did not mean that it could not be effective against the nanomachines themselves. The Dawn Star pattern explained clearly that it used these nanomachines to strengthen a person's physical body, super-enhance their mental power, and let a person's soul obtain the ability to materialize. Once the Dawn Star pattern was removed, all the nanomachines in the body would be expelled from the body, and the surpasser would once again become an ordinary person. However, Noah's constitution tyrannically absorbed all the nanomachines that entered his body and produced super-enhanced effects. In other words, even if the Dawn Star pattern was removed, Noah's enhancement would still exist. These nanomachines were no longer able to affect Noah. Therefore, in the process of Noah's constitution, tyrannically seizing the effects of the dawn star pattern. The nanomachines were still producing effects. In addition, it seemed that there was no way for Noah's overly powerful soul to materialize, resulting in some conflicts and unexpected changes. The specific manifestation of this change was the effect of materializing the soul into a weapon, had been reversed, and it became the effect of the weapon being spiritualized. The knight's sword and revolver thus became Noah's blaze. Therefore, in addition to strengthening his body, mental power and magical power, Noah also obtained two abilities from the dawn star pattern. One was to materialize the blaze that had become part of Noah's soul. The other was a kind of limited ability. Therefore, Noah was particularly puzzled. The reason why the knight's sword and revolver became the blaze was because the ability to materialize the soul was reversed. This was excusable. But where did this inexplicable limited ability come from? Noah. Just when Noah was still puzzled, a weak voice woke Noah, who was immersed in his thoughts, causing Noah to open his eyes. Ivanli appeared in front of Noah at an unknown time, and she had changed her clothes. It was a girl's uniform with blue shoulder guards and a white frilly collar on top of a white shirt. The part below the chest was wrapped in a black vest, and the lower half of the body was a blue pleated skirt. Originally, Ivanli was a very beautiful and cute girl, and with this uniform, she looked more youthful and lively, causing people to be unable to help but look askance. However, Ivanli's expression looked very tired, which gave Noah a fright. "What's wrong? Why do you look so tired?" "Of course I'm tired," Ivanli said, as if she wanted to cry but had no tears. Although there were instructions before implanting the dawn star pattern, who knew that the process would be so painful? I almost thought that I was going to be burned to death. Only then did Noah understand. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Ah!" Ivanli suddenly pointed at Noah with a face full of anger. "I'm going through so much trouble, and you're making fun of me." After saying that, Ivanli raised her fist and pretended to hit, causing Noah to laugh out loud. He dodged Ivanli's fist and ran away. "Don't run." A man and a woman, one running and one chasing, left the scene and disappeared at the end of the road under the backdrop of cherry blossoms. Chapter 186. As everyone knew, the organization that founded Haolang Academy was the Genetic Engineering Research Organization that developed the Dawn Star Rune, the Dawn Organization. Those who could enroll in Haolang Academy were all surpassers who had the Dawn Star Rune's adaptability and had the Dawn Star Rune implanted in their bodies. That was to say, the students who could study in Haolang Academy were all people who had become non-human beings and had the Dawn Organization's bioenhanced nanomachines implanted in their bodies. To put it bluntly, the students studying in Haolang Academy could basically be considered as the research subjects of the Dawn Organization. Therefore, if there was no mistake, the Dawn Star Rune's supernaturalization of the body and mind should be the result of manipulating the genetic inheritance of the surpasser through the nanomachines in the surpasser's body. In any case, the Dawn Organization was a research organization that studied genetic engineering. This was what many people had guessed as well, including Ivan. Therefore, the students who come to Haolang Academy to study usually have a reason for coming here. Walking on the road full of cherry blossom trees on both sides, and surrounded by cherry blossoms, Ivan sighed and told Noah, who was reading the entrance guide. Although there are some students who came because of the extremely generous treatment of Haolang Academy, such as free tuition, accommodation, food, and even living expenses, after those people realized that they would become the research subjects of the Dawn Organization, they should seriously consider whether to stay or not, right? Noah, who was reading the entrance guide, had some non-committal thoughts about Ivan's words. Indeed, no one liked to be a lab rat for research. Therefore, the students who came to Haolang Academy to study generally had a reason to do so. Noah also agreed with this point. However, humans were also a kind of existence that would worship strength in the depths of their hearts. In order to obtain the unparalleled power of others, there was nothing unusual about degenerating oneself. The students who leave this academy will have the Dawn Star Rune removed and become ordinary people again. Therefore, Haolang Academy is not worried that someone will quit halfway through and take away their research results. Ivan stretched and jumped in front of Noah. Facing Noah, he walked backward along with Noah's footsteps, and his eyes met with Noah's eyes. So Noah, if you don't have a reason to stay here, it's not embarrassing to go back on your word now. Hearing this, Noah shrugged. Indeed, Noah did not have a reason to stay in Haolang Academy. The only reason Noah came to Haolang Academy was because he relied on his incomparably trusted intuition. He felt that if he came here, he would be able to get closer to the world fragment that was lost in this world. He came here with the mentality of giving it a try. Although Noah trusted his intuition very much, if it was necessary, he would not stay here no matter what. At most, he would look for other ways to obtain the world fragment. Of course, Noah was not worried that he would become some experimental animal. Even if he was thrown into an experiment, Noah's body that could repel all negative forces and influences would ensure his safety. At that moment, Noah asked Ivanli in a perfunctory manner, "What about you? You have a reason to stay here, don't you?" "Who knows?" Ivan smiled slyly, but if one looked closely, they would find that her eyes were particularly serious. "Maybe, I'm here for the super good treatment of free tuition, accommodation, food and living expenses. Is that so?" Noah, who had been focusing on the entrance guide in his hand, did not notice Ivan's strange behavior and responded indifferently. "Well, since this academy wants to use us as lab rats, it's not a bad idea to let them raise us, right?" Right. Ivan laughed and played along with Noah's joke. She turned around and walked back to Noah's side. Together with Noah, they walked forward. Today was not only the day of the Dawn Star Rune implantation, but it was also the day of the entrance ceremony for the students who became surpassers. That was to say, every batch of Haolang Academy students would end in just one day. Then, the official classes would begin tomorrow. Following the entrance guide, Noah and Ivan found the place where the entrance ceremony was held. They entered the place that was much more luxurious than an ordinary school's auditorium. They found 2 seats and sat down. As soon as he sat down, Ivan looked around and saw the students sitting in their seats. He exclaimed in amazement, "There are quite a lot of people here." Noah also looked around. There were about 100 students in the auditorium. For such a luxurious school's entrance ceremony, it was a bit unreasonable to say that there were a lot of people. However, if one thought about it carefully, 100 people was actually a lot. There was only one person who could use the Dawn Star Rune in 1,000 people. In other words, the 100 people here had to be chosen from at least 100,000 students to reach such a number. If there were more than 100 people under such a probability, it was indeed a lot. Ding-ling! At this time, from the direction of the entrance, a crisp sound of a bell echoed, attracting the attention of many people. When the people who heard the sound looked in the direction of the entrance, all the sounds in the auditorium receded like a tide and disappeared. Ivan also widened his eyes slightly, and even Noah subconsciously turned his gaze to the source of the sound, unable to speak. Because there was a girl who would never disappear from one's memory. She left a deep impression in everyone's mind as she slowly walked in from the entrance and entered everyone's sight. It was a petite girl with long silver hair that reached her waist. Her skin was abnormally fair, and her eyes were an extremely eye-catching deep red. It was as if she came from a foreign country. She looked to be around 13 or 14 years old, and her figure was rather petite. The girl had an appearance that seemed to only exist in a dream. But under the gazes of so many people present, there was nothing called expression on her face that still had a little bit of childishness. Her silver hair was tied with a hairband with bells on both sides, and accompanied by the sound of the bells swaying, she walked forward. Just like that, the silver-haired girl directly crossed the aisle, came to an empty seat, sat down, and then like a statue, she stopped moving. Only then did the silent atmosphere in the auditorium quietly disperse. Everyone began to discuss spiritedly as they looked in the direction of the silver-haired beauty. It was as if they were admiring the beauty of the young lady as they chatted. "She's like a doll." Ivan also made the same exclamation. That child, is she from a foreign country? Noah didn't answer. He just stared in the direction of the silver-haired girl. Looking at the other party's expressionless face, he didn't move. Compared to the other party's beauty, Noah was more concerned about the other party's expressionless face. Of course, Noah's action, in Ivan's eyes, was as if he was absent-minded. At that moment, Ivan nudged Noah with his elbow in a teasing manner. Well, I can understand, but if you stare at her like that, it will give people the feeling of, that's why boys are like this. What's with that? Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He retracted his gaze and started to chat with the teasing Ivan. Not knowing how much time had passed, until the seats in the auditorium were almost full. On the podium in front, the sound of the loudspeaker was turned on. Hearing this sound in the auditorium, all the sounds disappeared again, replaced by another sound. Tap, 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 tap. That was the sound of high heels on the floor. Then another figure, who once again stole the attention of the students, walked out from the curtains at the side of the auditorium and walked up to the podium. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Some of them began to doubt their own eyes. The person who walked up to the podium had long black hair tied into 2 ponytails. Her body was wrapped in a pitch-black Gothic lowly dress. Her height was less than 1.5 meters, but on her doll-like face, there was a sense of intelligence and magic that others didn't have. That was a petite girl who didn't even look 10 years old. Chapter 187. Looking at the dark and magical little girl slowly walking up to the podium, the group of students seemed to be a little restless. Noah also looked at the little girl who looked like a doll, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He believed that the identity of this little girl was known to everyone present who had read the entrance guide about the director of Haolang Academy. That's right. The little girl in front of him, who looked like she was not even 10 years old, was the director of Haolang Academy. She was a genetic engineering research expert who belonged to the Dawn organization 99 Lunar Nights. In other words, if the students studying in Haolang Academy were all lab rats for research, then this little girl named 99 Lunar Nights was the person who wanted to use all the lab rats here for experiments. In front of everyone present, the director stood on the podium and looked at the many students below. A slightly evil smile gradually appeared on her delicate doll-like face. Welcome, freshmen, to Haolang Academy. I am the director of this academy, 99 Lunar Nights. Just when everyone thought that the director was going to start the boring entrance ceremony, without any nutrition, unexpectedly, the director tilted her head and said this. Although I would like to thank everyone who came from different places, that will have to wait until everyone has experienced the traditional activity of this academy, the ceremony of qualification. Below, Noah was slightly stunned. Ceremony of qualification? What's that? Not only Noah, but even Ivanli and the students in the auditorium were puzzled. The director seemed to ignore everyone's puzzlement and continued to explain. First, please confirm the person sitting next to you. Next to us? Noah and Ivanli immediately looked at each other. Needless to say, the person sitting next to Noah and Ivanli was each other. Then the director, who was full of evil, smiled, and her smile became more and more evil. The next sentence directly changed the atmosphere of the entire auditorium. Then, I would like to invite all new students to immediately battle with the person you have confirmed. Wadash! The entire auditorium suddenly burst into an uproar, and astonished voices continuously rang out from all directions. Duel! Noah and Ivanli, who were still looking at each other, narrowed their eyes at the same time. Ivanli turned his head abruptly to look at the podium, his face full of disbelief. Noah slowly raised his head and looked at 99 Lunar Nights, who was full of evil, with his dark eyes flickering. The director, on the other hand, seemed to not have noticed the commotion and began to explain cruelly. In the following duels, the winner will be able to obtain the Academy's recognition and become a student of the Academy. The loser will have his Daybreak Star rune removed after the duel. There are no restrictions on the specific rules. Everyone can use the miracle that they have obtained today, Blaze. If the victor isn't decided within 10 minutes, then both parties will be expelled from the Academy. At this point, The petite director seemed to be amused by her own words, and the corners of her mouth curled up. Of course, you can also choose not to use blaze. But it must be mentioned here that the so-called blaze is actually a weapon that materializes the soul through the spiritual power strengthened by the daybreak star tattoo. Therefore, blaze can only cause fatigue and pain to the attacking opponent's spiritual power, and will not cause harm to the person's body. However, if you don't use blaze, then the damage caused will be directly reflected on the opponent's body. However, this sentence was not able to make the crowd of students feel relieved at all. Instead, it aroused their indignation. What do you mean it won't cause harm? Didn't you say that as long as you have adaptability, you can enter the academy? Are you lying to us? Facing the anger of the crowd of students, the girl in black standing on the podium smiled indifferently. Don't forget, this is a school that cultivates combat skills. Everything is to filter out students with strength. If you can't understand this school's way of doing things, then give up on the daybreak star tattoo and leave Howling Academy. The air in the auditorium suddenly froze. Silence dominated the entire auditorium. Ivan clenched his fists tightly, as if he could not comply with this cruel rule. Just as he was about to stand up and say something, the sound of a chair being pushed aside sounded. Everyone's gaze, including 99th Lunar Night, the surrounding teachers, and all the students, all gathered on the youth who stood up. Noah glanced at 99th Lunar Night, turned around, and walked towards the door without hesitation. Seeing this, everyone present understood. Noah had chosen to leave. Seeing Noah leave so decisively, the smile on 99th Lunar Night's face disappeared. She looked at Noah's back and remained silent. Wait. Ivan, on the other hand, hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed the hem of Noah's clothes and asked anxiously, "You, what are you doing, Ivan?" Noah turned sideways and looked at Ivan, who was grabbing the hem of his clothes, with a puzzled expression on his face. Shouldn't I be the one asking this question? What are you doing? You, are you planning to leave? Ivan ignored Noah. His grip on Noah's arm tightened as he stared at Noah without letting go. Is it okay if I don't stay here? Isn't it obvious? Noah sighed. The chairman already said that I can leave whenever I want. This shouldn't be strange, right? But you'll have the daybreak star tattoo removed. Ivan's face was filled with disbelief. Even if that's the case, it's okay? Ivan. Noah shook his head with a smile, reached out, and patted Ivan's head. I don't know why you have to stay here, but I want to tell you that if you simply want to become stronger, it's okay if you don't rely on the daybreak star tattoo. This sentence caused all the students to widen their eyes in shock. It's okay if you don't rely on the daybreak star tattoo? Isn't that something that can make the human body stronger than humans? On the podium, the chairman also looked at Noah and chose to speak at this time. You mean you want to rely on your own strength to surpass the surpasser? Noah raised his head and looked at 99th Lunar Night. What's so strange about it? The daybreak star tattoo can give a person a body and spirit that far surpasses a human's. It can also bring a soul weapon, the blaze. That's why it's called a surpasser, which means surpassing humans. 99th Lunar Night shook her head, as if she was mocking Noah's naivety. Normal humans can't have stronger strength than this. Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows, glanced at the expressionless 99th Lunar Night, and then looked at the surrounding students who were looking at each other. He closed his eyes for a moment, and then suddenly opened them. In that case, why don't we carry out another qualification ceremony? As soon as this sentence came out, not to mention the surrounding students, even 99th Lunar Night was stunned. Another qualification ceremony? Noah curled his lips into a smile, pressed down on Ivan's hand that was tightly grabbing his clothes, walked past Ivan, who was looking at him, and took 2 steps forward, casting his gaze on the teachers standing on both sides of 99th Lunar Night. Everyone, the teachers of Howling Academy should also be surpassers, people who have obtained the qualifications to graduate from this academy, and are much stronger than normal surpassers. Right? The group of teachers who didn't understand what Noah meant had a strange expression on their faces. However, Noah's next sentence made the strange expressions on these teachers' faces freeze. I won't use strength that surpasses a human's level. Noah suddenly smiled. So teachers, why don't one of you come out and use the identity of a surpasser to fight with me, a human? The surrounding students all froze in place, as if they had been petrified, their mouths wide open in shock. Noah! Ivan cried out in shock. The teachers all had an expression of being unable to react, as if they hadn't thought that the spearhead would suddenly turn to them. For a moment, their faces were filled with bewilderment. Only 99th Lunar Night's doll-like delicate face sank, but her eyes also showed surprise. Chapter 188. Bearing the astonished gazes from all directions, Noah, who had a calm expression on his face, sighed in his heart. It was a pity. In fact, Noah was very curious about this school. Surpassers, the people hidden in this ordinary world. If this was the mysterious side of this world, then Noah didn't mind seeing with his own eyes what kind of power the surpassers in this world had. Unfortunately, 99 Lunar Night's words dispelled Noah's idea. As mentioned before, although he felt that he could more or less get closer to the world fragment in Howling Academy, Noah had no reason to stay here. If it was another unknown student sitting next to him today, then not only would Noah not leave, but he would also be happy to see the power of these new surpassers. However, the person sitting next to Noah was not a stranger, but the first real friend he made in this world. Although they had only known each other for less than half a day, Ivan had a personality and charisma that others couldn't hate, which made Noah spend a rather pleasant time with him. Let Noah fight with Ivan, for such a dispensable reason, like staying in Howling Academy? Then if he won, Noah would be kicking away the first friend he made in this world. If he lost, with Ivan's personality, he would definitely feel guilty, and he would still have to leave. Since that was the case, why not just leave and have a good time? Anyway, Noah didn't have any reason to stay here, right? As for removing the daybreak star pattern, Noah didn't care at all. All the effects of the daybreak star pattern had been absorbed by Noah's special constitution. Even if the daybreak star pattern was removed from Noah's body, Noah's enhancement would still exist, and the blaze, and the limit ability would also not disappear. Therefore, even if the other party didn't remove the daybreak star pattern from his body, afterwards, Noah would definitely use magic to expel all the nanomachines in his body at the right time. Of course, before that, it didn't matter if he let these people who thought that they had the power to surpass human experience a little bit of true strength. The ability Noah obtained from the daybreak star pattern, in addition to the blaze, there was also an inexplicable limit that appeared. By using this ability, Noah could freely adjust the strength of his various aspects of power. At first glance, this ability seemed useless, but Noah found that it was like a spring. The tighter the restriction, the higher it would bounce. This limit ability could make Noah's restricted power self-increase bit by bit. Hence, on the way to the auditorium, Noah had already restricted all of his mana and allowed it to enter a state of automatic enhancement. Now, Noah activated the limit ability to limit his own strength. All of a sudden, Noah's strength, stamina, endurance, speed, agility, and other physical attributes began to decline at a clear rate. It didn't disappear. Instead, it was as if he was wearing a limit device and was forced to a standard. In other words, these powers that exceeded the standard were all sealed in Noah's body, making Noah reach a state where he could only use the strength of an ordinary person. Shaking his arm's strength that had decreased to a frightening degree after the limit, Noah looked straight at 99 Lunar Nights on the podium, and the corner of his mouth hooked up. How about it, Miss Chairman? Do you want to see if the power that you said ordinary people can't have can do anything to me? Noah. Ivan quickly stepped forward. What are you talking about? How can ordinary people? Before Ivan could finish his words, 99 Lunar Nights suddenly laughed and interrupted Ivan's words. Since it's like this, there's no harm in giving it a try. After saying that, 99 Lunar Nights turned her head and looked at a middle-aged teacher. Teacher Daisuke, can I trouble you? Understood, Chairman. The teacher named Daisuke nodded and walked towards Noah, arriving in front of Noah. First he sized up Noah, then his eyes showed an indifferent expression. You really decided to only use the strength of an ordinary person to fight with me? Noah raised his hand and stopped Ivan, who still wanted to say something. Ignoring Ivan's worried face, he took a step forward. You also came from an ordinary person, right? You should be able to clearly distinguish whether or not I will use the strength of an ordinary person, right? Your opponent is not an ordinary surpasser, but an existence that can guide surpassers. On the podium, 99 Lunar Knights said, "It doesn't matter if you use the strength you obtained. You can also use Blaze. I can give you special permission." Noah didn't answer, but looked at Daisuke, silently expressing his disdain. Looking at Noah, who casually stood in front of him, Daisuke stretched out his hand and pressed his chest. Blaze. With the sound of the incantation to summon the soul, a gorgeous star pattern rotated from Daisuke's chest, bringing a hot flame, covering Daisuke's hands. After the flame dissipated, a pair of pitch-black iron weapons with lines on the surface appeared in Daisuke's hands. It was a simple weapon called brass knuckles. "I won't be merciful," Daisuke said indifferently. "What kind of power do surpassers have? Look carefully." After saying that, Daisuke fiercely clenched his fists, and the brass knuckles collided with each other. After a clang sound, Daisuke's feet stepped on the ground, and his body directly rushed toward Noah, clenching his fists, and the sharp part of the brass knuckles on his fists immediately flashed with some cold light. Shio! When he was only half a meter away from Noah, Daisuke's figure suddenly stopped, and his right hand drew a tricky angle, and in the sharp sound of the air exploding, he directly aimed at Noah's head. With that speed, with the speed of an ordinary person, it's absolutely impossible to avoid. Daisuke had such confidence. However, the careless Daisuke didn't notice that before he punched, Noah's body had already begun to move. As if he had already expected Daisuke's attack, Noah tilted his head before Daisuke punched. "Ho!" The fist with the brass knuckles immediately made a loud sound, brushing Noah's shoulder and cheek, and swinging in the air. Daisuke's face suddenly changed. At this time, Noah had already raised his palm, fiercely grabbed Daisuke's hand, and kicked Daisuke's knee. Bang! In the midst of the impact, Daisuke only felt pain in his knee, and his body softened, and he involuntarily knelt down. However, before Daisuke knelt on the ground, Noah's body turned, and his back was facing Daisuke, and his hand that grabbed Daisuke's arm pulled hard. In the state of Daisuke's unstable body, he directly carried Daisuke on his back and threw him to the ground. Thus, a standard shoulder throw was displayed in front of everyone. Bang! Go! Without warning, Daisuke was thrown to the ground by Noah's shoulder throw. In the midst of the collision, Daisuke suddenly spat out all the air in his lungs, and he was stunned. As a surpasser, he was actually thrown to the ground by a kid with the strength of an ordinary person? Wow! The surrounding students were in a hubbub. Liar! Ivanli covered her mouth, unable to hide her inner surprise. On the podium, 99 Lunar Knights' expression was slightly dignified, without the slightest trace of evil at the beginning. For the current Daisuke, those noises were like laughing at him, making Daisuke feel like his face was on fire. He gritted his teeth and jumped up fiercely. Before that, Noah once again seemed to have predicted Daisuke's action, and he stepped back to open the distance. Damn it! Daisuke's face trembled slightly, and he gritted his teeth, mixed with a little anger, and rushed toward Noah's direction again. Feeling the other party rushing toward him, Noah narrowed his eyes, looking at the figure of Daisuke, who was getting closer and closer, and the corner of his mouth slowly pulled up a cold arc. Chapter 189. Bang! With a muffled sound, one of the chairs in the auditorium was violently hit by a fist wearing brass knuckles, and burst into pieces. Woo! Around them, a group of students screamed, and moved away from the area where the two sides were located. Along with the rest of the students, they looked at the confrontation in the center of the field, and for a moment, they were completely dumbfounded. Who? They saw that Daisuke wearing brass knuckles was like a large meat grinder. While rushing forward, with an overwhelming momentum, he waved his fists like a storm, making the fist with brass knuckles carry bursts of wind, shrouding the front. Duh, 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 duh. In front of the storm-like attacks, Noah's eyes were tightly shut. However, it was as though he had a mind of his own. His footsteps were extremely nimble as he stepped left and right. Amidst a series of clear sounds, he actually dodged all of the fierce attacks that were coming at him one by one. If someone observed carefully, they would be able to notice it. Every time, before Dasuk waved his fist, Noah seemed to be able to predict it, and took the initiative to move his body, and dodged all the fierce attacks that were impossible to dodge with the speed and reaction of ordinary people. Such a predictive ability can be described as terrifying. Perhaps in this world, only Noah, who has extraordinary sensing ability and combat experience, can do such a miraculous thing. And Dasuk seemed to have noticed that the reason why Noah, who only exerted the strength of an ordinary person, could deal with him for so long was because of his terrifying predictive ability, and his face couldn't help but show a touch of anxiety, and his offensive became a bit more urgent. However, Dasuk's anxiety made his offensive have a few more flaws, which were caught by Noah, who closed his eyes and observed everything with his superhuman perceptive ability. Bang! Suddenly Noah, who was like a willow blown by the breeze, who was perfectly dodging Dasuk's offensive, fiercely stepped on the ground and drilled into Dasuk's arms. Dasuk was shocked and quickly wanted to respond. With the power of a surpasser, it was easy for him to react in time and react to it. If Daisuke didn't punch at this time, as if it had been calculated from the beginning, when Noah drilled into Daisuke's arms, Daisuke had already swung his fist. As a result, his fist fell into the air, and because he was leaning forward while swinging his fist, it was impossible for him to do anything else. Seizing this moment, Noah drilled into Daisuke's arms, spread out his hand, and suddenly clenched it, grabbing Daisuke's arm that had just punched out. Seeing Noah grab his arm again, Daisuke, who thought that Noah wanted to throw him over his shoulder again, subconsciously grabbed the ground. However, this time, Noah didn't throw Daisuke over his shoulder. Instead, he clasped Daisuke's arm with his fingers and twisted Daisuke's joints. In an instant, the fist that Daisuke had just swung seemed to want to return to where it came from. Following the trend of Noah's twisting joints, it bent and punched back at Daisuke's own chest. Bang! The fist with brass knuckles fell heavily on Daisuke's own chest. Goo! A huge force acted on Daisuke's chest, making Daisuke groan and retreat a few steps. His chest was in pain. It was different from the throw that Noah used just now. As a surpasser who had strengthened all aspects of physical fitness, even if he was hit by Noah's throw, Daisuke would only feel a little pain at most. His strengthened physical resistance would not let him be hurt by such an attack. However, it was different this time. It was Daisuke's own fist that hit him. That was equivalent to letting Daisuke eat the attack of a surpasser who had the same strength as him. Therefore, this time, the pain inflicted on Daisuke's chest really hurt him. He almost couldn't breathe, which made Daisuke angry. Do you only know how to play these little tricks? With a roar, Daisuke clenched his fists tightly and rushed forward. He raised his fist, and with a sharp wind-breaking force, he viciously smashed it down on Noah's shoulder, with a muffled sound in the air. Could it be that you want me, a human, to go head-to-head with you, a surpasser? Noah sneered, but his body moved in advance again. He didn't retreat, but moved forward. He leaned his body and pushed up. As the target of Daisuke's attack, his shoulder suddenly jumped up from under Daisuke's body and slammed into him. Bang! Because of the punch, even if Daisuke reacted, his body couldn't keep up with the reaction. He was hit by Noah's shoulder. Of course, with the strength of an ordinary person, even if he was hit by Noah's attack, the damage that Noah could do to Daisuke was very limited. But under this hit, Daisuke's body was slightly floating, and his feet were also off the ground. In the next second, Noah turned sideways, rotated his leg, and threw out a kick, kicking Daisuke's heel heavily. Daisuke, who was floating in the air, suddenly lost his balance. Pa! Thus, Daisuke fell to the ground and made a painful sound. Bastard! The furious Daisuke straightened his body and wanted to get up from the ground. However, at this moment, The surrounding students suddenly exclaimed in unison. Before Daisuke realized what these exclamations meant, behind Daisuke, a hand bent up, revealing a slightly sharp elbow, and heavily hit Daisuke below. Bang! With a blunt sound, the elbow mercilessly fell on the back of Daisuke's neck. Daisuke's eyes bulged, and his body fell back to the ground again. His vision was all blurred, and even his consciousness was in chaos. Daisuke couldn't help but squeeze out a low groan, covering his neck, supporting his hazy consciousness, and turned his head with difficulty, looking at Noah. You're really a surpasser, even if it's the strength of an ordinary person. If the back of the neck is hit, he should have fainted immediately. I thought my judgment was right. Noah looked condescendingly at Daisuke, who was paralyzed on the ground, and pretended to be surprised. Then he narrowed his eyes and suddenly lifted his foot. Of course, if you didn't faint, you'll faint if I hit you again, right? After saying that, Noah's heel was like a heavy iron hammer, bringing along a wind, and fell on the back of Daisuke's neck. Bang! Goo! Daisuke's pair of eyes bulged again, and his face turned white. His vision finally turned from blurred to darkness, and he completely lost consciousness. Chi! The brass knuckles on Daisuke's fist made a soft sound, turned into a flame, and dissipated in the air. Dong! Daisuke collapsed on the ground, his eyes closed, and he was completely unable to move. The entire place fell silent. Looking at Daisuke, who had completely lost consciousness on the ground, the pupils of the surrounding students slowly widened, and after a while, the sound of inhaling cold air constantly echoed. 99 lunar nights had closed her eyes, and no one knew what she was thinking. Her face was completely expressionless. Noah. Ivanli could only squeeze out such a call from his throat, but he didn't know what words to use to express the surprise in his heart, so he froze there. In front of everyone present, Noah patted the dust on his uniform, glanced at 99 lunar nights, who closed her eyes, and didn't say any words of victory, turned around, and walked towards the door. Wait! At this time, a suppressed roar sounded from behind Noah. I haven't lost yet. Covering his neck, Daisuke, who climbed up from the ground, grabbed a chair next to him, like a mad wild bear, rushed towards Noah, and threw the chair in his hand at Noah. The screams of some of the female students rang out. Noah fiercely turned his body, swung his foot, and kicked Daisuke's hand that was holding the chair. Daisuke screamed in pain, his hand loosened, and the chair suddenly flew out. In front of the spinning chair, Ivanli stood there sluggishly. Chapter 190. Whoosh! As if falling from the sky, the heavy chair spun in the air and smashed towards Ivanli with a muffled sound. Ivanli, who was still immersed in the shock of Noah defeating a surpasser teacher with the power of a normal human, didn't have time to react. He could only stand there stupidly and watch the heavy chair smash towards him. Just as Ivanli was about to instinctively close his eyes, a sound like this echoed throughout the auditorium. Blaze! The gorgeous flame with the crimson light illuminated every corner of the auditorium. Bang! The next moment, a gunshot that the students could only hear on TV echoed in the auditorium. A pitch-black bullet pierced through the air, leaving a long trail of light behind it. It was like an extremely small meteor as it pierced through the atmosphere, bringing with it a sharp piercing sound as it flew towards Ivan's chair. Bang! The heavy chair suddenly exploded as if it had exploded. It scattered into pieces and dust and fell to the ground. Ivanli subconsciously raised his hand to block the shockwave caused by the chair's explosion. Then he opened his eyes and looked towards the direction of the gunshot, along with everyone in the auditorium. Immediately, everyone in the auditorium saw it. He saw a weapon in Noah's hand that shouldn't have appeared here. Perhaps because he was too eager to use it, the flames from the blaze were still on Noah's weapon. After a while, the flames dissipated with a burning sound, exposing the weapon in the flames to the air. It was actually a gun. It wasn't a spear used for close combat, but a handgun. The body of the gun was as long as an automatic pistol. It was 8 inches long and carried a cylinder at the back of the gun. It was obviously a modified large-caliber revolver. The pitch-black body of the gun was covered with white veins like tree roots. The blaze of the revolver was held tightly in Noah's hand as he aimed it at the sky in front of Ivan. It was obvious who the person who had just saved Ivan from danger was. However, everyone had already forgotten about the chair. Even Ivan had forgotten about the danger he had just encountered. He was at a loss for words. Gun. It was no wonder that Ivanli and the surrounding students were so surprised. That was because the blaze, which was materialized from the soul, could not possibly be something like a handgun. Perhaps it was because the human soul itself was a very simple existence, but the blaze of the surpassers were also very simple weapons. For a weapon with an extremely complicated structure like a gun, it was very unlikely that it would appear in the list of blaze. Noah also knew this point. He put down his hand holding the gun and hid the revolver behind him as if he didn't want to attract attention. However, behind Noah, 99 lunar knights who was standing on the podium stared at the revolver in Noah's hand and said word by word. It seems that you are an exception. Exception. Exceeding the norm was an exception. Exceeding the norm was an exception. Possessing the blaze, that was impossible to appear under normal circumstances. Therefore, Noah was an exception. Regarding this, Noah remained silent. The revolver in his hand turned into a flame and disappeared on the spot. Then Noah didn't stay any longer. Under the silent atmosphere, he walked out of the auditorium step by step. Noah didn't notice it. Although everyone in the auditorium was watching him leave, there were 3 people whose eyes were different from the others. There was not only surprise, but also other extremely complicated emotions. One was 99 lunar knights who was standing on the podium. One was the brown-haired youth who was standing in the corner. The last one was the doll-like silver-haired girl who stole everyone's attention as soon as she entered the auditorium. Walking out of the auditorium, Noah came to the sky full of cherry blossoms. He raised his hand and looked at his hand, frowning deeply. 99 lunar knights said that the blaze was a weapon of the soul. It could only cause damage to the mind and not the body. However, Daisuke's brass knuckles could smash the chair into pieces. Noah's revolver could also shoot the chair. Both of them could destroy the chair. Since the blaze could destroy the chair, then it should be able to cause damage to the body, right? However, 99 lunar knights said that the blaze could only cause damage to the mind. That was obviously a lie, right? Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but shake his head. Impossible. 99 lunar knights wouldn't lie so easily. After all, as long as the students in the auditorium fought according to the qualification ritual, then the lie would be instantly exposed. Therefore, Noah felt that what 99 lunar knights said shouldn't be a lie. However, the blaze should have other secrets. At the very least, Noah felt that the knight's sword and revolver that had become part of his soul seemed to have undergone some changes. As for the specific changes, Noah still didn't know. However, in terms of appearance, his revolver had some changes. On the body of the gun, there were more vein-like white lines. Moreover, Noah's revolver didn't need to be loaded with bullets. As long as he turned his mental power into bullets and filled the revolver formed by his soul, Noah's revolver would be able to shoot continuously. In other words, the weakness of Noah's revolver, having less bullets, was completely made up for. Of course, in addition to this, the revolver also had another weakness. Looking closely, Noah's raised hand was constantly trembling, which made Noah bitterly laugh. I almost forgot. Because of the power enhancement, the gun's weight and recoil have been increased. It requires a certain amount of arm strength to use it. It was because of this that Noah, who used an ordinary person's arm strength to fire the gun, almost broke the skin on his hand and dislocated his bones. Noah, who secretly cursed himself for being careless, was about to leave when an urgent voice sounded. Wait! In the auditorium, Ivan quickly ran out. When Noah turned around, he was already in front of Noah. Then he slowed down and met Noah's gaze. In the end, he couldn't say a word. What's wrong? Looking at Ivan's complicated expression, Noah helplessly smiled. Don't we need to go through the qualification ceremony? The chairman said that as my opponent, you have already forfeited, so I am qualified. Ivan lowered his head, and then raised it up with force. His beautiful eyes flashed with a stubborn expression. "You chose to give up because of me, right?" Noah, who clearly saw the stubborn expression in Ivan's eyes, subconsciously wanted to shake his head, but under Ivan's gaze, he couldn't help but dispel the thought and sighed. "Is it important? It may not be important to you, but it is very important to me." Ivan took a deep breath and showed a determined expression. "I have something that I want to do no matter what, so I must stay here. Is that so?" Noah shrugged. "Then haven't you achieved it now?" "But that was achieved by stepping on other people's path." Ivan's voice was slightly dull. "Even if you don't care, I still can't not care. Then all the more reason for you to pull yourself together." Seeing the determination on Ivan's face turn into pain, Noah couldn't help but reach out and touch her head. "Otherwise, wouldn't my efforts be in vain?" Ivan's mouth slightly opened, but after a while, he pursed it and changed it into a smile. "Sorry and thank you." "Ah." Noah chuckled and nodded. "Good luck." The conversation ended, but at this moment, another voice interrupted. "Can you give me a little time to talk to you?" Accompanied by such a sentence, at the entrance of the auditorium, a girl dressed in black walked over step by step. Chapter 191. Haolang Academy, First Grade Classroom. Compared to the luxurious Western-style building outside, Haolang Academy's classroom seemed very ordinary. The ordinary here meant that the classroom had an ordinary area and ordinary furnishings. However, the tables arranged in the classroom were not the single tables used in primary and middle schools. Instead, they were long tables for 2 people and were quite wide. At this time, the new students who passed the qualification ceremony gathered in this classroom one by one, each looking for a seat and sitting down. There were about 30 or 40 new students in this classroom. The rest were still being treated because they were injured during the qualification ceremony. Blaze was a weapon formed from the soul, so it could cause damage to the soul. This point had already been confirmed. The proof was that the new students here had more or less received a direct attack from the blaze of their dual opponent, but their bodies had not received any damage, only feeling a bit mentally tired. Thus, most of the new students who were injured had received a direct attack, such as being hit by a punch, which was why they stayed outside to treat their injuries. Among those present, the freshmen who had been struck by Blaze were currently sleeping on the tables with tired faces. A small portion of the freshmen, who hadn't suffered any damage, had begun to chat and introduce themselves. Not long after, a girl with a ponytail appeared at the door, attracting the curious gazes of many people present. The person who came was Ivanli, who had also been announced as qualified. The students here were all very curious about Ivanli. This was not only because Ivanli was very cute and beautiful, but also because Ivanli seemed to be very familiar with that person in the auditorium. He defeated a surpasser as an ordinary person. Moreover, the person he defeated was a surpasser, who was a teacher of Haolang Academy. In addition to the blaze of the revolver, that should not have appeared. How could a person who gathered so many conditions not receive attention? Unfortunately, that person had already left Haolang Academy. Therefore, everyone's curiosity was focused on Ivanli, who seemed to be very familiar with the other party. However, in the next moment, the figure of a person who had also entered the classroom behind Ivan completely stunned the students in the classroom. Soon after, a commotion broke out among them. That person. How could this be? Didn't he leave the academy already? Yes, the person who came in behind Ivan was surprisingly Noah, who was supposed to leave the academy. Ivan seemed to be in a good mood. His beautiful face was full of smiles. After looking around the classroom, he came to the last row and waved cheerfully at Noah, who was still standing at the door. "Noah, over here." Seeing Ivanli's cheerful appearance, although Noah was a bit helpless, he still obediently walked over. Under the noises and pointing of the freshmen, he sat down with Ivanli at a table shared by 2 people in the last row of the classroom. Even so, the gazes of the surrounding freshmen were still focused on Noah. Curiosity, surprise, bewilderment, doubt, and other emotions were displayed without any concealment. Seeing this, Ivan evilly nudged Noah with his hand. You're really popular. If it's just being popular, then that's fine. Noah waved his hand carelessly. They're just curious as to why I'm here, right? That's true. At the mention of this, Ivan beamed with joy. Even I almost thought that I wouldn't have the chance to sit in the same classroom as you. But luckily, the chairman didn't let you go, and recruited you again. Outside the auditorium where the entrance ceremony was held, before Noah and Ivan could say goodbye, 99 lunar nights appeared in front of the two of them. The other party's intention was very simple. It was to let Noah continue to study in Haolang Academy. According to the other party, with the strength of a normal person, he could defeat the best of the surpassers. Based on the position of the chairman of Haolang Academy, 99 Lunar Nights was looking forward to how far Noah could go as a surpasser in the future. Perhaps this was only one of the reasons, because both Noah and Ivan could guess that the reason why 99 Lunar Nights made an exception to let Noah continue to study in Haolang Academy was not only because of Noah's future, but also because of Noah's blaze. The exception of the blaze revolver. Because of this, 99 Lunar Nights made an exception and personally appeared to ask Noah to stay. Therefore, when Noah was still considering whether to agree to stay or not, Ivan, with a face full of joy, made the decision for Noah. He nodded repeatedly and helped Noah agree. Noah knew that Ivan was still feeling guilty for leaving, which was why he acted so rudely when he knew that he could stay. But he didn't say anything and let Ivan be happy. After all, although there was no reason for him to stay, at the same time, Noah didn't have any reason to leave either. Originally, Noah chose to leave because of Ivan. Since both of them could stay, then Noah naturally didn't have to leave. Therefore, Noah and Ivan came to the classroom together. Sigh. Noah heaved a sigh. I feel that just entering the school is very tiring. That's true. Even Ivan showed a weak smile. The implantation of the Daybreak Star tattoo at the beginning was already very tiring. And then there's the qualification ceremony. If it wasn't for you, I would still have to fight. The first day is already so tiring. I'm scared just thinking about the future. Don't tell me something unexpected will happen later, Noah said with a smile that wasn't a smile. For example, between you and your deskmate, only the one with better final exam results can stay. The one with worse results has to drop out or something like that. It can't be. Ivanley's expression froze, and his smile became forced. No matter what, it can't be to that extent, right? As he said this, Ivan began to fidget, but in the next second, he saw Noah's smile and suddenly woke up. Are you trying to make fun of me? Ivanley raised her fist angrily. Well, just kidding, just kidding. Noah laughed, then smiled at Ivan and said this very casually. Don't worry. If that kind of thing really happens again, I will still choose to let Ivan stay. Looking at the relaxed smile on Noah's face, listening to the seemingly casual words from Noah, Ivan's heartbeat suddenly sped up. His face blushed, and he quickly turned his head away. What's wrong? No, nothing, really? But your face is so red. Then you're mistaken. But you look wrong. Right. La. Okay. I'm mistaken. Why are you so angry and hitting people? Humph. Just as Noah and Ivan were fooling around at the door, a ding-ling sound entered everyone's ears. Then, the classroom suddenly became silent. When Noah and Ivan also looked at the direction of the door, the next moment, a beautiful figure was imprinted in everyone's eyes. Silver waist-length hair, deep red eyes, and hair with bells on both sides of her hair. Her figure was petite, and as beautiful as a doll. It was the silver-haired girl with stunning looks. On the side, Ivan made a sound of surprise. Did that child also pass the qualification ceremony? It was natural that Ivan would be surprised. After all, such a soft and beautiful girl, no matter how you looked at it, did not look like she was good at fighting. Just like in the auditorium, she did not care about the gazes of the people around her. After entering the classroom, she looked around. In the next second, a pair of crimson eyes were fixed in a certain direction. In that direction, Noah's gaze just so happened to meet with that person's. Chapter 192. Separated by a classroom, Noah and the young lady's eyes met. Just when Noah thought that she was about to shift her gaze away, who knew that the young lady would continue to stare at him? Noah was startled. Ivan blinked and looked at Noah strangely. That child seems to be looking at you, right? Is that so? Although Noah had the same thought, he still replied with a question that he didn't mean. It should be a coincidence, right? It was a pity that the moment Noah said this, the silver-haired young lady strode forward. Ding ding! Her long silver hair that reached her waist swayed with its owner's footsteps. The young girl's expression did not change at all. Accompanied by the ringing of the bell, she walked to Noah's side. Then, she lowered her head slightly and bowed. Noah and Ivanli looked at each other, then nodded and saluted with strange expressions. At this moment, the silver-haired young lady lifted her head and moved a chair from the seat beside her to the other side of Noah and sat down. Thus, with a beautiful girl with tea-colored hair on his left and a beautiful girl with silver-colored hair on his right, Noah received strange looks from all the students present in this situation, where it was as if he was hugging two girls in each arm. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. Undoubtedly, there were a lot of empty seats around. Furthermore, he was already sitting with Ivan, so why did she purposely sit beside him? Furthermore, he wasn't sure if it was just Noah's imagination. Noah had a feeling that the other party was secretly observing him. On the side, Ivanli's eyes moved back and forth between Noah and the silver-haired girl's face. After a while, he looked at Noah with a subtle expression. Do you know this child? Haha. Noah laughed dryly and didn't answer. Do I look like I know her? But, Ivan whispered to Noah, no matter how you look at it, she looks like she's secretly looking at you, right? That seems to be the case. Noah could naturally sense that someone was looking at him. He immediately turned his head and looked over. The silver-haired young lady was startled, as if she was afraid that her secret observation of Noah would be discovered. She didn't even know that her attention had already been discovered, and turned her head away. Noah's mouth twitched again. Ahem. It was as if Ivan was trying to smooth things over for Noah. With a kind smile on his face, he leaned over and faced the silver-haired girl. Hello, I'm Ivan Yongsong. The bell on the silver-haired young lady's head shook slightly, and at the same time, she slowly turned her head and stole a glance at Noah before lowering her head to Ivan. My name is Julie Siktuna. Please take care of me. Is her name Julie? The name is as cute as the person. Ivan seemed to have completely forgotten about Noah's existence, and his body slowly moved closer to the young lady named Julie. I'll call you Julie, is that okay? Yeah. Julie expressionlessly moved her lips. That's fine. However, Ivan cared about another word from Julie's mouth. Yeah. It means yes. Oh, you have a habit of saying things? So cute. Thank you for the compliment. You're also cute when you're expressionless and modest. Really? Ivan, who was chatting with Julie, didn't notice that because he unconsciously moved closer to Julie, Ivan's soft breasts under his uniform were tightly pressed against Noah's arm. Noah's expression had completely turned into a resentful expression, while Ivan and Julie were chatting. In fact, it was just Ivan talking as if they were close, and Julie only responded. He was under the gaze from all directions, and he felt his head start to hurt. Sure enough, staying in this school was a wrong decision? When Noah started to feel uncomfortable, the students who finished the treatment slowly walked into the classroom with exhausted expressions. Almost at the same time, as if they had anticipated the arrival of all the freshmen, the window at the side suddenly opened with a creaking sound. Hello. Hello. A coquettish voice, accompanied by the sound of the window being opened, echoed together. Immediately, a young girl suddenly appeared on the window. With a perfect somersault, she jumped from the window to the podium, entering everyone's sight. She was a girl who was cute in all aspects, but also strange in all aspects. The reason why she was cute was very simple, because she looked like she was only 17 or 18 years old, with a head of beautiful black hair, and a delicate face. Coupled with her vitality, she was very cute no matter how you looked at her. The reason why she was strange was even simpler. She was wearing a maid's outfit, and on her head was a pair of rabbit ears. Such a cute and strange girl stood on the podium. She didn't care about the fact that she might be exposed under her dress, and straightforwardly struck a pose. Nice to meet you. I'm Moonlight Glass Rabbit. I'm everyone's class teacher. Please affectionately call me Teacher Little Rabbit. The coquettish and cheerful voice unsurprisingly made everyone, including Noah and Ivan, except for the expressionless Julie, who couldn't tell what was on her mind, stunned. They didn't know how to react. No matter who it was, they would be stunned, right? A girl who was at most 17 or 18 years old suddenly popped out and said she was the class teacher. Not to mention, her unique entrance, unique coquettish voice, and unique clothing would make people subconsciously stunned. Not to mention, all the girls who called themselves Moonlight Glass Rabbit were gathered here. Oh. Then Teacher Little Rabbit's still self-proclaimed gaze swept over Noah and let out an extremely exaggerated sound of surprise. Full of vitality, she reached out her hand and pointed at Noah. Found it. You're the exception, right? After saying that, Teacher Little Rabbit made a thump jump sound effect, fiercely jumped into the air, and landed on the table in front of Noah. Lying down, she said with a smile, Teacher Little Rabbit, I also saw the battle where you defeated Daisuke-sensei. How should I say it? You're really amazing. Although Daisuke-sensei is only at the level of rank 3. But you can use the strength of a normal person to defeat a rank 3. Teacher Little Rabbit, I almost fell for you. Ivanley and Julie had completely shut down and were unable to react. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and when he felt that even his head was starting to hurt, he faintly sighed and asked Teacher Little Rabbit, who was close by. What's rank 3? You don't know. Teacher Little Rabbit's eyes widened in surprise, but in the next second, as if it was a play, she giggled. It's the Daybreak Star rune implanted in your body. It's also divided into levels. Teacher Little Rabbit said as she put her hand in front of Noah and stretched out a finger, making a 1 gesture. The Surpasser, who has just been implanted with the Daybreak Star rune, is rank I, which is your current level. The Surpasser can also continuously train themselves so that their body and spirit can be strengthened faster than ordinary people. At the end of the semester, the school will arrange a ceremony called Sublimation Ritual to let you upgrade your level. If your body and mind are fully trained, you can successfully upgrade, and your body and spirit will once again be strengthened beyond imagination. Noah's eyes couldn't help but light up. He can continue to be strengthened? Then wouldn't his body, spirit, and magic be strengthened again? Well, because you're super excellent. The news that the chairman made an exception and allowed you to enter the school has already spread. Teacher Little Rabbit jumped off the table full of spirit, stuck out her tongue at the surrounding students, and made a cute expression. So, you'll have a super strong classmate in the future, so don't be defeated. After saying that, Teacher Little Rabbit returned to the podium. Then, let's first make the necessary explanations. By the way, Teacher Little Rabbit returned to the podium by jumping. Chapter 193. Then. Has everyone received it? With a tone so sweet that it gave people goosebumps, Teacher Little Bunny ran back and forth in the classroom like a real rabbit. Everyone seemed to be used to this crazy rabbit. They looked at the things in their hands, which were the student handbook, student ID card, and dormitory guide. As for the school rules and dormitory regulations, you can read them yourself in your free time. The student ID card can be used as a credit card. There will be a monthly allowance of 100,000 yen for everyone to use. Everyone, please don't lose it. 100,000 yen. In the classroom, the students' exclamations rang out one after another. 100,000 yen of living expenses every month. Not to mention a student's living expenses, it was more than enough for a family's living expenses. Noah, who didn't pay much attention to this, clearly saw that when Ivanley heard that there would be 100,000 yen of living expenses every month in the student ID card. His hand holding the student ID card tightened. Ignoring the surrounding gazes, he stood up and asked Teacher Little Bunny with a serious face. Teacher, can the school send my monthly living expenses back home? Send it back home. Noah's heart moved. He glanced at Ivanley, and saw the serious expression on Ivanley's face. Teacher Little Bunny seemed to be startled, but then she pressed her fingers against her cheeks and smiled cutely. This is a problem that the previous students haven't mentioned. You can apply to the school yourself. There shouldn't be any problem. The serious expression on Ivanley's face suddenly melted. He sat down with joy from the bottom of his heart. He held the student ID card and solemnly put it into his arms as if it was a treasure. Then, please listen to me carefully. Teacher Suki clapped his hands and gathered the attention of all the students in the classroom. In our academy, there is a so-called tripping double-blade partnership system. That is a system where two people are paired up to carry out various types of training and development. Therefore, the academy has a requirement. Until the end of this week, everyone has to work hard to decide on an official partner. Of course, if everyone is unable to make a decision by then, we will arbitrarily let the remaining people partner up. At that time, you won't be able to make your own choice. By the way, don't casually choose your partner just because you look down on the tripping double-blade system. Teacher Little Bunny blinked. In order to deepen the understanding between tripping double-blade, the school hopes to let a group of tripping double-blade spend all the time together as much as possible. That is to say, people who become tripping double-blade will not have the opportunity to act separately in the school life in the future, even the dormitory. Hearing Teacher Little Bunny's words, in the classroom, many of the students who were still thinking that it was not essential suddenly became serious. This is a very serious matter. Ivanley also seemed to be seriously thinking about it. Even the dormitory is the same. It's best if it's someone who can get along well. Otherwise, life here will really become very difficult. Noah, on the other hand, rubbed his temples in distress, feeling more or less put in a difficult position. It was not that Noah was dissatisfied with having to have a daily and non-daily partner, nor was it that Noah wanted to be a lone ranger. In fact, Noah was not without experience in this aspect. When he was a child, when he was still in Fairy Tale, Noah went on missions with Alusha, Mira, and Lisanna more than once. In the world of the Black Bullet, the police also acted as partners in pairs. Although Noah had never seriously chosen a partner, in order to let the cursed child in Fairy Tale cooperate better with his partner in battle, this topic was added to the usual training by Noah. While teaching the children, he also learned a lot. Therefore, for the two of them to act as partners, Noah did not have any difficulties. However, this world was still a completely foreign world to Noah. Other than Ivanley, Noah did not even have a friend that he could talk to. Just like Ivanley said, if they didn't get along well with each other, they would definitely have a hard time if they formed a partnership. If possible, Noah also hoped that he could have a partner that he could get along with. In that case, just the aspect of living together would be a lot better. In a week's time, in such an environment where he basically did not know anyone, would he be able to find a partner that he liked? Noah was distressed in this aspect. In the next moment, this distress was immediately shattered by Teacher Little Rabbit's words, and it reorganized and changed into another distress. The official double tripping blade will be determined on the weekend. At that time, the dormitory will also be adjusted so that the two people who are double tripping blade will live together. Before the weekend, everyone will form a temporary double tripping blade and live together for a week. Teacher Little Rabbit said with a mischievous smile. Moreover, that smile was directed at Noah. Seeing this smile, Noah's heart suddenly filled with an ominous premonition. It turned out that this premonition was completely correct. So then, since it is a temporary double tripping blade, I will decide who you should be temporary partners with. Teacher Little Rabbit jumped up and said such a sentence word by word. Until the official double tripping blade is decided, everyone will temporarily form a temporary double tripping blade with your deskmate. When these words came out, Noah did not know how others would react. Noah only knew that at this moment, his face completely stiffened and became very ugly. My deskmate. At the same time, Ivan also reflexively turned his head and looked to his side. When he saw Noah's stiff face, his delicate face suddenly became very interesting. Hey 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 hey! Screams very quickly resounded throughout the classroom. Ivan jumped up with a red face and shouted in Teacher Little Rabbit's direction. Wait, Teacher Little Rabbit, this is not right. Oh hey hey hey, what's wrong? Teacher Little Rabbit still had a smile on her face. What's wrong, isn't it obvious? Ivan's voice involuntarily increased, and his face became redder and redder. My desk mate is Noah. Do you want us to live together? That's great, isn't it? Teacher Little Rabbit spread out her hands, with a "you're lucky" look. The guy living together is not only very handsome, but also very strong. If you cultivate a good relationship, then won't you feel very safe? Indeed, Noah is very handsome and very strong. He makes people feel very safe. Ivan wavered for a moment, but then immediately shook his head desperately. No, that's not the problem. Teacher, we have 3 people here. Noah was the first to regain his composure and stood up. Since the school's dormitory arrangement is based on the double tripping blade arrangement, then we should live in a dormitory with 2 people, right? Ivan immediately nodded, but in the end, it only made Teacher Little Rabbit laugh as usual. It's okay, there's always a way. Anyway, it's only for a week. You guys can endure it, okay? You just wanted to enjoy it, right? Noah was so agitated that he raised his voice, and then looked at Julie, who had been silent and secretly sizing him up. Julie, classmate, you think so too, right? 3 people living together will cause all kinds of problems, right? Julie tilted her head, as if thinking about something, and after a while, she said with an expressionless face, I'm fine with it. Noah and Ivan were petrified on the spot. Ha 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 ha. Teacher Little Rabbit held her stomach and laughed out loud. Then it's decided. Noah, who did not want to see Ivan's current expression, covered his head and lowered it. Now Noah was incomparably certain. Staying in this school was definitely a wrong decision. Chapter 194. Wow, Julie's skin is so white. Ivan's is also very white. It's much worse than Julie's. But Ivan's here is bigger than mine. Really? Don't touch. Listening to the unsettling sounds coming from the bathroom, Noah, who was sitting at the small round table, held a cup of tea with a bitter expression. Undoubtedly, it's a double room. Why did I have to squeeze in? What's going on with this school? At this time, Noah returned to the dormitory room assigned to him, Ivan and Julie. It was already dark outside. The fluorescent lights in the dormitory released light, illuminating the room that was supposed to be 2 people, but now 3 people were squeezed in. The dormitory in the school was not bad, not to mention the relatively large area. The room was not only equipped with a bathroom, a hot water cooker, a TV, and a small round table, but also standard dormitory beds. Without looking at the bunk beds, it was not a problem for 3 people to squeeze into such a room. But if there were 1 boy and 2 girls among the 3 people, it would be a big problem. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that except for Noah, the other 2 girls were not only extremely beautiful girls, but also, although one was shy, because of her cheerful and talkative personality, she quickly forgot to guard against him. The other one was even more exaggerated. She did not have the slightest intention of guarding against him. The evidence was that Noah was clearly in this room. In the bathroom, Ivanly and Julie were still having a great time. Their voices that made one think of fluttering in the wind were not suppressed at all. It was obvious that they either did not care about what they heard, or had completely forgotten that they were also here. How am I going to spend this week? Noah could only sigh. He began to divert his attention, and began to immerse his mind in the information revealed by Teacher Little Rabbit during the day. Rank. Daybreak star pattern also has ranks. This was something that Noah only found out today. Not only Noah, but also the new students in the school did not seem to know until today. Noah couldn't help but become very interested in this. If the daybreak star pattern also had a level, and he was currently only at rank I, then, if he had the opportunity to obtain the sublimation instrument, to increase its level, wouldn't he be able to obtain a certain level of enhancement? Noah didn't care much about the strengthening of his body. After all, Noah's body had already been strengthened by the protozoan virus. In terms of his body, it was unlikely that the strengthening that Noah could obtain would increase his strength significantly. What Noah really cared about was the strengthening of his spirit. It was an enhancement that had never happened before. And now the daybreak star pattern had such an effect. Not only did it strengthen Noah's spirit, but it also increased his magic power and magic power. That was a situation that couldn't get any better. I also have a general understanding of where the limit ability came from. The daybreak star rune had the ability to level up. Just like how soul materialization turned into weapon soul form, the ability to level up also turned into downgrade. However, first of all, Noah's daybreak star pattern was still at rank I, so it couldn't be downgraded. Second of all, even if it could be downgraded, Noah's physique that could eliminate all negative effects would also be immune to this negative effect on the owner. Thus, under these two contradictions, the limit ability that could allow Noah to downgrade on his own was derived. Moreover, the target of downgrade was no longer just rank, but Noah's various abilities. In addition, Noah's physique did not allow Noah to have abilities that would only have negative effects on him. Thus, the limit evolved again, with the addition of the ability to allow the restricted ability to automatically strengthen itself, becoming an ability that was also beneficial to the owner. It passed through the exclusion range of Noah's physique, and was possessed by Noah. Of course, without the mutation caused by the conflict between Noah's physique and the daybreak star rune, the downgrade ability would not have evolved into a limit ability. The daybreak star rune that was just implanted were all rank I? Noah recalled the various aspects of the enhancement he received when the daybreak star rune was implanted and activated the limit ability. Under the effect of the limit ability, Noah's physical, mental, and other aspects of his physique were all adjusted to rank I level. Magic power, a power that a surpasser could not possess, was all restricted, allowing these restricted powers to enter a state of automatic enhancement. In any case, these powers would not be used unless it was necessary. Thus, rather than being idle, it would be better to use the limit ability on them and let them automatically enhance themselves. Therefore, the limit ability was still very good, and it was also very helpful to Noah. After this limit ability, Noah was really only a rank I surpasser. Compared to the other rank I surpassers, Noah's physical, mental, and other external conditions were the same as the others. However, Noah's combat experience, combat skills, and perception ability, these internal conditions could not be limit ability. And Noah, who possessed all these, was destined to be someone that an ordinary level 1 surpasser couldn't compare to. Gotcha! At this time, the sound of the bathroom door being opened sounded. Wait, Julie. Then, Ivan's voice mixed with shock and anxiety also passed into Noah's ears. Noah subconsciously turned his head and looked in the direction of the bathroom. Then, the scene that entered his eyes almost made Noah, who had unknowingly brought the teacup to his mouth, directly spit out the tea in his mouth. The first thing that entered Noah's eyes was the slender and white, jade feet and thighs that seemed to be made of pearls. Then Julie's full appearance that appeared in front of Noah was also exposed in front of Noah's eyes. Because she had just come out of the bath, Julie's thin clothes were tightly stuck to her skin, making her slender body's curves clearly visible. Even the buttons on her clothes were buttoned in the wrong place, causing Julie to reveal a lot of her white skin. And besides these, Julie's body did not have any other concealment. Yes, Julie was actually only wearing a shirt on her upper body. The rest of her body was not wearing anything. In this state, this beautiful girl who had caused the entire school's freshmen to exclaim in admiration appeared in front of Noah. How could Noah remain calm? Moreover, behind Julie's back, Ivan seemed to want to prevent Julie from appearing in front of Noah in this state. In the end, because he couldn't make it in time, he chased out of the bathroom with only a bath towel wrapped around his body. Looking at Julie's thin shirt, the skin of her thighs and shoulders were all exposed to the air, and Ivan wrapped in a bath towel. The appearance of his arms, thighs, and shoulders were even more thoroughly exposed. Noah's brain began to crash. Julie, Ivan glanced at Noah, whose brain had crashed, and pulled Julie with a red face. Idiot, idiot, idiot. How can you come out of the bathroom like this? Julie tilted her head with a puzzled face. Is there a problem with my pajamas? There is a big problem. Ivan pulled Julie, as if to avoid Noah's sight, and hurriedly walked towards the bathroom. Quickly go back and change your clothes. Wait. Being suddenly pulled by Ivan, Julie suddenly lost her balance and fell to the ground. In a panic, Julie's hand unconsciously pulled forward and pulled the bath towel on Ivan's body. Pa! The next second Julie fell to the ground. A bath towel floated down and covered Julie's head. Time paused. Ivan, as if frozen on the spot, was frozen on the spot, his eyes opened to the widest they had ever been. When Noah saw the large amount of white skin in front of his eyes, his heart stopped for a second or two. The whole world seemed to have lost the existence of sound at this moment, falling into an oppressive silence. After a long time, Noah stood up like a robot. His body was stiff as he walked past the fallen Julie and the petrified Ivan. He opened the door, walked out, and gently closed the door. Ah! Screams from inside the room resounded. Chapter 195. There was no distinction between men and women in the dormitory of Haolang Academy, whether it was the male dormitory or the female dormitory. Although they were not close to each other, they were still in the same building. When entering through the dormitory door, the first place the students arrived at was the common lounge of the dormitory students. There, not only were there luxurious items such as televisions, tables, chairs, and even sofas, but there were also magazines, comics, and games on the bookshelves in the corner for entertainment. In addition, snacks and drinks were also self-service. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was a place for people to enjoy themselves. Studying in this school could exempt one from tuition, lodging, and food expenses. There was also a place for people to rest and play. If one could continue to study in this school, they would be able to survive without having to do any work. The treatment was extremely good. Not to mention, the school also provided 100,000 yen for the students' living expenses every month. Sigh. And under such extremely enjoyable treatment in the lounge, Noah sat on the sofa and sighed, and said such a sentence in despair. I might as well just sleep outside tonight. That wasn't impossible. After all, Noah had lived in almost all kinds of deep mountains and forests in order to practice crush. At that time, if Noah felt that he would stay in this place for a long time, he would build a wooden house or something. And if he did not stay for long, he would simply find a tree and sleep directly on it. In any case, he could not return to the dormitory now. Otherwise, not to mention how Ivanli would react, Noah would definitely not be able to look at Ivanli directly. Thinking of this, Noah's mind could not help but recall the scene of Ivanli's seductive naked body and a pair of full breasts. His heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and he quickly shook his head. No, I have to calm down first. Noah, who was full of distress, did not notice that at the entrance of the dormitory, two girls were coming in together from the outside. As soon as they entered the dormitory, one of the two girls inadvertently saw Noah sitting on the sofa and stopped. Little Ba, what happened to you? The other girl widened her big, watery eyes and looked at her companion strangely. Then she followed her companion's line of sight and turned to look at Noah. Isn't that? The young girl called Little Ba nodded. After a moment of silence, she said, Yeah, I'll go over first. You can go back first if you want. As soon as she finished speaking, the girl named Ba didn't wait for the girl she called you to respond. She impatiently lifted her feet and walked towards Noah. Wait, Little Ba. The girl named Ya finally reacted and hurriedly followed him. Noah, who was agonizing over whether to go out for the night or to go back later, sensed a commotion not far away. He raised his head and looked ahead. He saw two young girls approaching him. They were two very unique young girls. The one walking in front of Noah was a young girl with long, flowing black hair. She didn't hide her destination at all. Rather than saying she was cute, she was more like a beautiful young girl. Not only did the young girl have a beautiful figure, she also exuded a mature and awe-inspiring aura. She gave people the feeling that although they were playmates of the same age, she was an adult. Coupled with her heroic figure, her presence was unusually strong. Walking behind the heroic young girl, who seemed to be chasing after the former in a panic, was an existence that contrasted sharply with the other girl. She was a petite girl with a somewhat childish look on her face. Her hair was cut to her shoulders and seemed to have been tied into two small braids in front of her. She was different from the other girl, who exuded an awe-inspiring temperament. Her entire body was filled with a delicate feeling that made people involuntarily want to protect her. However, this young girl also had a presence that others couldn't ignore. Her presence wasn't the same as the former's, but a pair of extremely eye-catching, full and round breasts. Undoubtedly, her figure was more delicate and petite than the average person, but her round breasts were not only bigger than Ivan's, they were even far above those so-called adults. From Noah's point of view, among the people he knew, only Mira and Mugging could compare to her. Noah also knew these two young girls. They had entered the school today like Noah, and they had introduced themselves in the classroom. They were Noah's classmates. If he remembered correctly, the heroic young girl with long black hair was called Orange Bar, and the extremely delicate young girl with a great figure was called Sui Gaoya. Under Noah's gaze, Orange Bar and Sui Gaoya began to slow down and approach, as if they knew that Noah had noticed them approaching. However, Orange Bar still walked towards Noah confidently, and only slowed down slightly. Sui Gaoya, on the other hand, hid behind Orange Bar, as if she was a little scared. She followed Orange Bar and walked in front of Noah. Hello. Orange Bar didn't lose his heroic spirit, but also didn't lose his manners as he nodded at Noah. I'm Orange Bar. I still remember the names of my classmates. Noah scratched his cheek. As for me, I don't think I need to introduce myself, right? Of course, even if I want to forget you, it should be very difficult. Orange Bar smiled bitterly and shook his head. I'll call you Noah. Is that okay? Of course. Noah nodded, and then turned his gaze to Sui Gaoya, who was hiding behind Orange Bar. You're Sui Gaoya, right? Sui Gaoya seemed to be frightened. Her pretty face turned red, and her body shrank behind Orange Bar. Noah looked at Orange Bar with a puzzled expression. I'm sorry, you only went to a girls' school before, so she's not good at dealing with boys. Orange Bar lowered his head and apologized to Noah. Please don't mind. You're too polite. This time, it was Noah's turn to laugh bitterly. No matter what, you should sit down first. It's better to talk this way, isn't it? Then we won't stand on ceremony. Orange Bar took Sui Gaoya's hand and sat down on the sofa opposite Noah. Putting Tachibur aside for the time being, when Sui Gaoya sat down, the pair of round breasts in front of her chest that had a strong sense of presence jiggled up and down uncontrollably, causing Noah to involuntarily glance over. After pausing for less than a second, he hurriedly shifted his gaze away and silently cursed himself. There was no helping it. Ivan's naked body was too stimulating, and it happened not long ago. It made Noah inexplicably pay attention to this aspect. At that moment, Noah deliberately coughed and asked suspiciously, Is there something you need from me? It should be considered a busybody. Orange Bar sized up Noah and said, You seem to be very distressed just now. Is that because of your roommates? There's nothing to hide. Noah's face turned bitter and he sighed again. Or rather, it would be strange if you weren't distressed when two of your roommates are of the opposite sex, right? That's true. Orange Bar said awkwardly and somewhat approvingly. I just want to ask, is there anything I can help with? Help, Noah said with a somewhat uncertain tone. Do you want to help me? I'm indeed a bit of a busybody, right? Orange Bar nodded heavily with a serious expression on his face. However, young men and women living in the same room is a bit worrying. Worried? Noah's face was suddenly filled with a strange expression, and he laughed awkwardly. Although I can roughly guess what you're worried about, we just met today, and I don't ask you to believe me. However, if it was a man and a woman who were both alone, then it would be a different story. But there are two girls in my room, so it's impossible to make a move on two girls at the same time, right? That's true. Orange Bar lowered his head with an embarrassed expression. Puffed. Sui Gaoya couldn't help but laugh out loud. When she realized that Noah was looking at her, her pretty face turned completely red. She hid her face in Orange Bar's arms, and after a while, she secretly raised her head and quietly sized up Noah. Seeing Sui Gaoya's performance, Noah didn't know how to react. In the morning, Julie had been secretly observing him from the side. And now it was Sui Gaoya's turn? His school life was really tough. Chapter 196. Speaking of which, your strength is really strong. At this time, Orange Bar deliberately changed the topic as if to change the atmosphere. But when it came to this topic, his face couldn't help but be serious. His eyes stared at Noah, and he said in amazement, Teacher Bunny said that Daisuke-sensei is a level 3 surpasser, and he graduated from this school after 3 years of combat training. Compared to level I, who has just started and hasn't received any combat training, you can't compare at all. It's really hard to believe that you can defeat Daisuke-sensei with the strength of an ordinary person. Sui Gaoya raised her head from Orange Bar's embrace and also looked at Noah. Her eyes were filled with amazement and envy. It was no wonder that Orange Bar and Sui Gaoya were so surprised. If they really knew how strong a surpasser was, and how strong a level 3 was, then they wouldn't just be surprised, they would be in disbelief. The Daybreak Star rune strengthened the body and spirit of a surpasser, differently according to the level. Specifically speaking, the strengthening through the Daybreak Star rune was actually something similar to multiplication. For example, a level I, Daybreak Star rune, could strengthen a person's index by 10. A level 2 would strengthen a person by 20, and a level 3 would strengthen a person by 30. Assuming that a normal person's strength is 1, then when this person becomes a surpasser and enters level 1, after being strengthened by 10, this person's strength will manifest as 10. And at level 2, this person's strength would naturally be 20, and at level 3, this person's strength would be 30. Noah's actions were equivalent to using the 1 of a normal person's strength to fight against a monster that had undergone many years of training. The monster's strength was definitely not just 1, but 4 or 5. The monster's strength had even reached 120, or 150, after being strengthened by the 30 of level 3. It was more than 100 times stronger than a normal person. After all, if a surpasser's body and mind were not trained to a certain level, it would be impossible for the Daybreak Star rune to evolve successfully. Therefore Daisuke, who has successfully promoted to level 3, his strength level is not only 1, but also 4 and 5. Under such circumstances, multiplied by level 3 by 30, wouldn't that be 120 and 150? To be able to defeat someone who was more than 100 times stronger than him in terms of strength, speed, agility, reflexes, and so on, was it not shocking enough? To be able to defeat such an opponent, your martial arts and combat experience have shocked me greatly. Orange Bar's eyes were filled with sincerity as he sighed. I have also practiced martial arts for many years. I thought that I would be considered quite strong among my peers, but compared to you, I am like a child. Noah, who originally had a nonchalant expression on his face, became slightly interested. Have you practiced martial arts as well? My family runs a dojo. Orange Bar nodded. The Orange School of 18 Arts that I belong to is a famous school that focuses on ancient martial arts and incorporates various other martial arts. Therefore, I can see how shocking the skills you used in the battle that day were. If possible, I really want to spar with you. Saying so, Orange Bar's face also showed an unconvinced expression. Obviously, he was not just saying it, he really wanted to do it. Little Bar? Sui Gaoya called out worriedly. On the other hand, Noah glanced at Orange Bar, whose face was full of unconvinced and awe-inspiring, with some surprise, and then suddenly smiled. This school is a school that cultivates combat skills. I believe that there will be plenty of opportunities to spar with classmates. That's true. Orange Bar was also eager to give it a try. That's really exciting. With amazing combat skills and combat experience, and being able to defeat level 3, at the level of an ordinary person, and now with level 1 enhancement, how strong is Noah? This was something that Orange Bar especially wanted to know. He believed that this was something that the others who knew about Noah's deeds also wanted to know. However, if these people knew of Noah's true strength after the limitation was lifted, what kind of reaction would they have? Thinking of this, Noah could not help but laugh. Although the daybreak star rune's enhancement to the human body existed in the form of multiplication, Noah knew that there was a limit to it. Otherwise, how could Noah's body, which had been strengthened to a frightening degree by the level 1 virus, only grow by a negligible degree after being strengthened to 10 times by the level 1 virus? Therefore, once a surpasser trained their body and spirit to the extent that even the daybreak star rune could not strengthen them, then the daybreak star rune would also be completely helpless, right? Of course, that was something that an ordinary person could not do. Noah could only be considered an anomaly. Next, Noah and Orange Bar began to discuss martial arts and combat. Sui Gaoya, who could only watch Noah and Orange Bar communicate, sat obediently at the side, secretly sizing up Noah's slightly determined face, her pair of watery eyes flashing slightly. Kacha. Gently opening the door, Noah poked his head in from outside and looked into the room. About an hour had passed since the lights out time, so there was naturally no light in the room, but only a dim light. Noah listened carefully for a while, until he heard breathing sounds coming from inside the room. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He tiptoed into the room, and very carefully closed the door. His actions were like that of a thief, making Noah feel a headache. Going back to my own room like a thief, what the hell is this? With this kind of thoughts that could easily make people feel helpless, Noah walked into the room, and looked at the direction of the bed. At this time, the two girls who were Noah's roommates were already deeply asleep on the bottom bunk of the bed that was divided into 2 bunks. Julie was still wearing the white shirt. Her white thighs were directly exposed to the air. Her body was on the side, and she slept very soundly. Beside Julie, Ivanli was wearing a set of pajamas with floral patterns. The style of the pajamas was a combination of very ordinary clothes and pants. Who knows if it was because he considered that there was a girl in his roommate, so he chose such a conservative style. He hugged Julie, and let out rhythmic breathing sounds. Looking at the sleeping faces of Ivanli and Julie, Noah couldn't help but smile, and took off his uniform jacket. Just when Noah wanted to climb to the top bunk to sleep, a cold voice echoed in the extremely silent room. "Don't you plan to say something?" Noah's movement froze. On the bottom bunk, Ivanli, who was hugging Julie, stared at Noah with a pair of gem-like eyes. Although her face was a little red, there was no shyness in her eyes, only anger. "I thought you were going to sleep somewhere else tonight." Hee hee. Noah laughed dryly, then immediately sighed as if he gave up, and his body relaxed. "If apologizing can solve the problem, I don't mind doing it. I didn't ask you to apologize." Ivanli also sighed, half squinted at Noah, and her tone was more or less filled with dissatisfaction. "That's not your fault, don't worry. I won't blame you, but..." Ivanli's pretty face was a little redder, and she stuttered. "No matter what you saw, you have to forget it." "Forget? If I can forget, why would I be so worried?" Noah could only yell this in his mind, and made a gesture of surrender. "I should be the one saying this. If Ivanli can forget what happened today, and get along with me like before, I will be very grateful." "That's good." Ivanli turned her head and hugged Julie. "Good night." "Aha." Seeing that Ivanli didn't bother him anymore, Noah admired Ivanli's generosity, and at the same time, he spoke softly. "Good night." Not long after, Ivanli once again breathed rhythmically. Looking at the sleeping Ivanli and Julie, who were as cute as a doll, Noah smiled after a while. "I wish you all sweet dreams." Chapter 197. Chirp, 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 chirp. When the morning birds chirped and the soft sunlight shone into the room through the gap in the curtains, Noah woke up from his sleep. Not sure if it was because of the change of environment, Noah woke up earlier than usual. After rubbing his black hair, he sat up. Noah poked his head out from the edge of the bed and looked at his lower bunk. He thought Ivanli and Julie were still sleeping, but he only saw an empty bed. Even the quilt was folded and placed neatly at the end of the bed. Seeing this, Noah was slightly surprised. He is a lot more relaxed than before. Usually, when two people who had only known each other for a day moved around him, no matter how small their movements were, Noah's vigilance would wake him up. Ivanka and Julie were obviously on their feet, but when the two got up, Noah, who slept on the upper bunk, didn't wake up, which was enough to prove that Noah was indeed more relaxed than usual. It seems that the way Ivanley and Julie slept last night made me relax a lot. Noah scratched his cheek, and didn't care about this anymore. After all, no matter how relaxed his vigilance was, once someone approached Noah with hostility, malice, or even murderous intent and attacked Noah would still wake up. Therefore, vigilance in this regard was not necessary for Noah. Instead, it would make Noah less likely to be woken up and have a good night's sleep. Immediately, Noah stretched and got out of bed. In order to prevent any trouble, Noah, Ivanley, and Julie had already stipulated that if they wanted to change clothes, they could only change in the locker room. Following the rules set yesterday, Noah yawned while walking to the locker room and opened it. The next moment, Noah finally began to regret his idea. He regretted his excessive vigilance. It was an unnecessary thought. Otherwise, with Noah's perception ability, he would definitely be able to detect a presence in the locker room at this time. Therefore, while yawning and regretting in his heart, Noah's face began to tremble. In the locker room, the person who came before Noah maintained the appearance of taking off the shirt she was wearing just now. She slightly widened her deep ruby eyes and stared straight at Noah without saying anything. Noah could clearly see that on the petite body, except for the lower half of the body, there was nothing else. Fortunately, the silver hair spread behind the person, covering the entire back of the person. The shirt that the person had just taken off was also in the hands of the person, covering the front of the person's body, which just happened to cover the person's private important parts. Therefore, Noah was still in the area, not as dangerous as when he saw Ivanley's naked body last night. At the next moment, the other party's flat voice sounded. But at that moment, Noah heard an indifferent voice. "Good morning," Noah reacted, showing a forced smile that couldn't be more forced. Good morning, Julie." Julie was still expressionless as she spoke. "Noah also needs to change clothes?" Yes. Noah was almost reflexively answering Julie's question. "Then can you wait outside for a while?" Not knowing if it was Noah's illusion, even Julie's expressionless face had a little bit of redness at this moment. "If I change clothes in front of Noah, I will be very embarrassed." Noah, who was in a state of shutdown, finally woke up. After bitterly laughing twice, he slowly closed the door. Looking at the cold door in front of him, Noah was speechless for a long time. After a while, he covered his face with regret. When will this week end? On both sides of the small round table, Noah and Julie, who had already changed into their uniforms, sat opposite each other and looked at each other. From Julie's mouth, Ivan seemed to have insisted on practicing swordsmanship in the morning. Today, he was like Noah, because he came to an unfamiliar environment and woke up early. Just like before, he simply went out to practice. Julie had rushed from abroad to attend the entrance ceremony yesterday. So because of the time difference, she went to bed very early last night and woke up very early today. Therefore, what happened next happened. Looking at Julie's expressionless face, because of what just happened, Noah couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. After taking a deep breath, he met Julie's deep red eyes. "Oh right, because Ivan was also there yesterday I couldn't ask, but Julie, I have always wanted to ask you a question." Julie's expression didn't change at all. Only her lips moved like a real doll as she nodded her head. "Please ask. Why did you want to sit next to me yesterday?" Noah asked straightforwardly. "You must have deliberately sat next to me, right? You have been secretly observing me, right?" For a moment, Julie's pair of beautiful eyes fluctuated, and the surrounding atmosphere also changed. Julie maintained a fixed look at Noah, seemed to be lost in thought, and after a while she answered. "Because Noah is very strong." Noah was suddenly stunned. After hesitating, he asked in a low voice. "Is it because I am very strong? So you pay attention to me?" "Yeah." Julie didn't hesitate in the slightest. It was impossible to tell what she was thinking as a nostalgic expression appeared on her small and delicate face. "Dad is also very strong, like Noah, very, very strong." Noah's heart moved, and he was slightly relieved. Julie, who usually had a difficult expression, showed a touch of nostalgia. Thinking about it, Julie's father should be very important to her, right? Because I am as strong as Julie's father. So Julie pays attention to me? This is really like the behavior of a child. What Julie said next made her seem even more like a child. Can I also be like that? Julie lowered her head slightly and said, can I also become as strong as Dad and Noah? For some reason, Noah heard a trace of longing and sadness in Julie's emotionless voice. This made the expression on Noah's face gradually become serious. Looking at Julie, who lowered her head, he couldn't help but reach out and touch her head. Ding-ling! The sound of the bell also sounded. Julie raised her head and looked at Noah with a bit of disbelief, as if she didn't expect Noah to suddenly do this. A strong sense of longing can make people stronger. In front of Julie, Noah said with a smile, if Julie has such a strong sense of longing, then she can definitely become stronger. Julie's eyes rippled, and on her head, a silver ahogue swayed like a tail. After a long time, Julie spat out a word. Yeah. Haolang Academy first grade classroom. Good morning. Good morning. While saying good morning to each other, Noah and Julie walked into the classroom together. Under the gaze of everyone around them, they walked to their seats. Noah, Julie, there. Ivan was sitting in his seat and waving in the direction of Noah and Julie. There were also some students around him, and they seemed to have been talking until just now. Although it was only a day, Ivan's cheerful personality and good social skills seemed to have made him like a fish in water in this class. And he made a lot of friends. You guys are so slow. As soon as he sat down, Ivan complained to Noah and Julie. I thought you guys were already here, so I came directly. Do you know how lonely I was after not seeing you guys? Lonely? Noah glanced at Ivan. Weren't you chatting happily with your classmates just now? It's because I'm lonely that I want to find someone to chat with. Ivan said this, as if it was a matter of fact. Just as Noah wanted to say something, at the door of the classroom, a sweet and cheerful voice came into the classroom. Good morning, he saw Teacher Little Rabbit holding a baton. She skipped in from the outside, bringing bad news. Today's first class is extracurricular training. Everyone gather at the school gate. Chapter 198. Hear, hear. Everyone gather around Teacher Little Rabbit. In front of the school gate, Teacher Little Rabbit, who was still in her maid outfit with a pair of rabbit ears, waved her hands in an extremely exaggerated manner, as if she was afraid that others wouldn't see her. Those who didn't know would think that she was standing at the edge of a cliff, waving her arms with all her might, as if she was about to fall. It was very comical. However, with such a conspicuous target, the group of students didn't have to worry about not being able to find a place to gather. One by one, they ran over from not far away and lined up in front of Teacher Little Rabbit. At this time, whether male or female, all of them had changed into gym clothes that were convenient for exercise. Noah, who was standing at the edge of the team, was frowning because of his gymnastics attire. When he sensed the curious gazes from all directions from time to time, he couldn't help but hold his left hand with his right hand and hide his left hand behind his back. It couldn't be helped. Noah's left hand was very eye-catching. It wasn't a big deal, but Noah's entire left hand, starting from his shoulder to his wrist, and even the back of his hand, was tightly wrapped in white bandages. Seeing Noah's left hand wrapped in white bandages, which couldn't be hidden because he was wearing a short-sleeved gymnastic suit, the surrounding students cast curious glances at Noah's hand. What happened to your hand? Standing beside Noah, Ivan also sized up Noah's bandaged left hand and asked, Did you get hurt? Standing on the other side of Noah, Julie also cast a concerned gaze. A pair of deep red eyes stared straight at Noah. Although there wasn't much emotion in them, there was a trace of doubt surging in them. Obviously, Julie was also concerned about this problem. It wasn't just Ivan and Julie. Orange Bar and Sui Gaoya, who he had just met last night, were also around Noah. Although studying in this kind of school means that you're already prepared to get hurt, with the enhanced recovery of a surpasser, injuries will heal faster. However, if there's a problem, it's better to ask for leave. Orange Bar came closer and suggested, How about it? Do you need me to help you ask for leave from Teacher Little Rabbit? You're all worrying too much. Noah helplessly shook his head. He didn't hide it anymore, and directly raised his hand, that was wrapped in bandages from the cuffs to the back of his left hand with a nostalgic smile. This is an injury from a long time ago. It's healed long ago, but because it left a scar, it doesn't look too good, so I wrapped it up. When he was young, in a conflict with the Phantom Lord during his first mission, in order to save Alusha, Noah had used his body to block the attack of the Phantom Lord sorcerer, and was severely injured of him. That injury eventually healed, but the scar remained on Noah's arm, and accompanied him for many years. For a long time, Noah appeared in people's sight wearing long-sleeved clothes and a jacket, so basically, no one noticed that Noah's hand was always wrapped in bandages to hide the scar. But this time, after changing into a gym suit, there was no way to hide it. On the side, Julie tilted her head and looked at Noah. Are you okay? Looking at Julie, who looked up at him like a small animal, Noah stroked her head with a relaxed expression on his face. It's okay, don't worry. Ah. Feeling the big hand stroking her head, the ahog on Julie's head suddenly shook. Even though her face was still expressionless, her good mood was clearly felt by the people around her. Ivan glanced at Noah, then glanced at Julie, and then put his face in front of Noah with a meaningful look. When did your relationship with Julie become so good? Good. The hand stroking Julie's head didn't stop, and Noah tilted his head in puzzlement. Very good. Ivan's eyes were half closed, and he smiled lazily. Didn't you notice it? Noah and Julie looked at each other and shook their heads, making Ivan speechless. Is everyone here? At this time, Teacher Little Rabbit's refreshing voice sounded. Then, the content of today's first lesson is physical enhancement. Physical enhancement. The students present were startled and looked at each other. That's right. It's physical enhancement. Teacher Little Rabbit jumped up and down and began to explain. Everyone knows that the Daybreak Star tattoo can strengthen one's body through something similar to multiplication. Of course, the more the surpasser who has the Daybreak Star tattoo implanted in their body, the better the effects will be, right? The expressions of the students were a little relieved as they nodded. Using the previous example, all of the students who had just become surpassers were only at 1 in all aspects of their physical abilities. Some of them were even below 1 in terms of physical strength, endurance, strength, reflexes, and speed. Then, under such circumstances, even with the enhancement of level 1 multiplied by 10, at most, the physical ability in that area would only be 10, or even less than 10. However, if the student's physical abilities could be trained from level 1 to level 2 or level 3, then after multiplying by level 1 by level 10, even if the Daybreak Star rune hadn't been upgraded, it would still be able to reach level 20 or level 30. Apart from the normal lessons that the students had to go through, Howling Academy's combat training was of the utmost importance. However, physical enhancement and training were also included. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of the Daybreak Star tattoo's great enhancement effect? Therefore, we first have to start with the most basic physical training. After that, we will continue to train everyone's strength, speed, agility, reflexes, and even the body's ability to resist attacks. Of course, there is also our most important combat training course. Teacher Little Rabbit nodded with a face full of joy. So what we need to do today is the most basic physical enhancement, which is running. When they heard the word running, many of the students showed blatant rejection. However, if they wanted to increase their physical strength, the simplest, most direct, and most effective method was undoubtedly running. Noah, who had gone through many years of training his physical abilities, could attest to this point. Therefore, Noah was concerned about another aspect. It's just running. As soon as he spoke, Noah gathered the attention of all the students around him. Oh, as expected of an exception. You asked so directly, but it's good to ask. Teacher Little Rabbit giggled and pointed the baton in her hand at Noah, throwing a flirtatious glance. No matter what, the academy was built to train your combat skills. It's the same even if it's just running. Therefore, there are special rules here. After saying this, Teacher Little Rabbit opened her hand as if to say long live, and pulled open a piece of cloth that had been in her hand at some unknown time. There was only one word written on the cloth. Running. That's right. It's running. Teacher Little Rabbit seemed to be excited as she jumped up. First of all, everyone will run 10 laps around the entire academy. The first to complete 10 laps will be considered to have completed the task. However, in the process of running, if you see someone in your field of vision, Teacher Little Rabbit's smile became even more brilliant, and she spat out words that made people shudder. Don't be shy, just fight your way up. Fight! Many people cried out in surprise. Wait, teacher! Orange Bar raised his hand and stepped forward. In other words, we have to fight the people around us while running, right? That's right. Teacher Little Rabbit smiled cutely. The rules are very simple. As long as you don't use blaze, you can use any other means. After saying this, Teacher Little Rabbit did not give anyone a chance to ask questions. She jumped to the side and took out a colored firecracker. Then get ready, begin. Following Teacher Little Rabbit's words with a pop sound, the sound of the colored firecracker reverberated. The group of students first looked at each other, then immediately rushed out like a fish, scampering outside. Chapter 199. Ha'ewa Dash. Hearing the cold shouts and loud shouts of the students fighting behind him, Noah, who was running alone in a forest path, looked around and couldn't help but feel speechless. Now there wasn't even a single person beside Noah, because as soon as he started running, before Noah could run too far, the students who ran out of the school gate with Noah immediately scurried away, as if they had met the god of plague. Not long after, they all ran away without a trace. Obviously, no matter what, Noah's classmates were not willing to appear in Noah's field of vision and become Noah's opponents. After all, even the level 3 school teacher wasn't a match for Noah, who only displayed the strength of an ordinary person. These were only level 1 students who had just started training. How could they want to fight with Noah? With this mentality, as soon as they started running, the people around Noah all ran away without a trace. Of course, it wasn't that all the students didn't want to fight with Noah. No matter what, these students were still young and vigorous boys and girls. There were also some who weren't convinced by Noah, or who wanted to prove their strength by defeating Noah. In the end, the dream was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. How could these children, who were just ordinary middle school students before the daybreak star rune, be a match for Noah? As a result, the students who rushed towards Noah in a burst of ha'ia, filled with vigor, were all kicked away by Noah in the next second in a burst of wah-wah, even louder screams. With the strengthening of the daybreak star rune, presumably, Noah's kick would at most make these students feel a bit of pain and wouldn't cause them any injuries. Noah knew that in his class, there were people like Ivanley who had experience in learning swordsmanship and other martial arts. There were even people like Orange Bar, who belonged to a certain school of martial arts. In the future, these people would become the leaders of this batch of surpassers. These people would definitely be like Orange Bar, challenging Noah because of his outstanding battle prowess and skills. They would attempt to continuously improve themselves by challenging the strong. Therefore, Noah was always prepared to deal with the sudden appearance of these people. Noah guessed that these students weren't like the students who didn't dare to challenge Noah. They were afraid of appearing in Noah's field of vision, and they were also afraid that Noah would catch up to them and attack them if they ran in front. Therefore, they deliberately fell behind and ran at the back. They must have deliberately sped up and ran to the front, preparing to use the advantageous terrain to launch an attack on Noah. The school was surrounded by sand dunes, mud fields, and wild forests. Different combat styles would also be affected by the terrain. When Noah ran to the terrain that others were good at, he should be able to meet the real challengers, right? Rustle, rustle. Just as Noah was thinking about this, the trees that were used to optimize the scenery suddenly shook and made a sound. Noah stopped in his tracks. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, a figure rushed out from behind the shaking trees, like a wild wolf pouncing on its prey. With the sound of the wind, he swung his fist and hammered Noah's body, landing on Noah's body. However, before the attacker could rejoice, his opponent's entire body directly passed through Noah's figure, and the punch landed on empty air. It's actually an afterimage. The attacker's face changed. However, in the next moment, with a paw sound, the attacker felt that his foot was tightly grabbed by a strong palm before it could land on the ground. Oh no! Sensing the danger, the attacker immediately wanted to twist his body and break free from the hand that was grabbing his foot. Too slow. Unfortunately, Noah didn't give the attacker a chance to react. With a strong pull, he pulled the attacker in front of him, clenched his fist, and raised it above his head. Hiya hiya! But just as Noah was about to punch his opponent, another figure suddenly flew out and fell from the sky. As he shouted, he threw a fierce punch towards Noah's body. Noah's fist immediately stopped. He raised his eyebrows and didn't continue to attack. He pulled the attacker's foot and threw the person in his hand out. Moreover, he threw the person in the direction of the other attacker. As a result, the two attackers suddenly collided with each other. Bang! In the muffled sound, two muffled groans were also heard. The two attackers followed the gravitational pull and fell from the air. When they were halfway down, they adjusted their bodies and staggered as they landed on the ground, stabilizing their bodies. Only then did Noah see the full appearance of the two attackers. The first attacker was a short boy who wore a pair of glasses on his face. His eyes were quite fierce, and even his face looked fierce. He gave people a feeling that he was deliberately pretending to be fierce. The second attacker was a taller boy. Compared to the first attacker, he was slightly kinder. However, he exuded a different kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. These two were also Noah's classmates. He remembered that the short boy with glasses was called Oki Hokusaki. The other boy looked quite inconspicuous, but he exuded a presence that couldn't be ignored. If Noah remembered correctly, his name seemed to be Jishitotaru. Noah, who subconsciously called out the latter's name, narrowed his eyes slightly. On the other side, Jishitotaru covered his abdomen that was hurt when Oki Hokusaki was thrown onto him. There was a hint of bitterness and helplessness in his laughter. Sure enough, it's not that easy. Idiot. Idiot. The boy named Oki Hokusaki covered his head that hit Jishitotaru's abdomen and mercilessly scolded his companion. Who told you to shout so loudly when you attacked? It would be strange if others didn't react in time. If I had shouted first, wouldn't they have let go of little tiger? Jishitotaru stood up. He seemed to be used to his companion's insults and didn't care at all. Actually, they did let go of little tiger. But we also embarrassed ourselves. Oki Hokusaki stood up and snorted coldly. Why did I become a temporary tripping double blade with an idiot like you? Because we sat together that day. Jishitotaru retorted. Then a pair of bright eyes stared at Noah. If that's the case, then I won't say much. Little tiger, do you want to continue? Of course. Oki Hokusaki pushed his glasses and also stared at Noah. No matter who the opponent is, I won't lose. Despite his words, Oki Hokusaki's face was full of seriousness. Obviously, he didn't think that he was invincible. Jishitotaru, on the other hand, looked at Noah with a different expression. It was an emotion that seemed like interest, but also like mutual appreciation. Noah, who saw Jishitotaru's gaze, was puzzled. His face curled into a smile. Jishitotaru, Oki Hokusaki, don't you think the way you greet each other is a little lacking? No, you're wrong. Jishitotaru's gaze never left Noah. His body was tense and vigilant. We came here only after careful consideration. That's right. Oki Hokusaki assumed an attacking posture and stared at Noah like a tiger eyeing its prey. To defeat you here. Is that so? Compared to Jishitotaru and Oki Hokusaki, who were extremely vigilant, Noah's posture was very casual. Even his voice sounded very relaxed. Then go ahead and try attacking me. Hearing this, Jishitotaru and Oki Hokusaki didn't say anything, but their expressions became more and more serious. Hey Totaru. Oki Hokusaki's body became more and more tense, and his voice trembled. Did you notice? Yes. A drop of sweat slid down Totaru's cheek, and he put on a brave smile. I can't find any flaws at all. What's wrong? Opposite him, Noah suddenly smiled. If you're not going to attack, then I'll go first. Jishu Totoro and Oki Hokusaki's expressions became tense at the same time. They glanced at each other, and in the next second, they made the same decision. Strike first and gain the upper hand. Stomp dash. With a violent stomp, Jishu Totoro and Oki Hokusaki pressed their bodies and rushed forward. You're tuning in to the Lee Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.